Welcome to the At the Table with the Herities podcast. We're David and Amy, a couple of imperfect followers of Christ. Come on in and join us. This is where you'll be inspired and encouraged by stories of believers, how they found Jesus and how they follow him, how he moves and how he changes lives. We are blessed to walk it out together with you. Welcome to the At the Table with the Herities podcast. You guys, we are on episode 6. It seems to blow our minds every time we do this. And I think that's the humbleness of the Lord saying, thank you for sharing your stories. We were just giggling with these guys about what a production this was for us to put this whole thing on. And I resisted it. But being obedient to the Lord has blessed us to be able to become friends with people like Jamie and Jeremy and to literally walk alongside them. Literally, we get to be alongside each other and we're just getting to know each other. But I feel like I've known these guys forever. I feel like I've known them forever. And it's only been what?
Less than a year.
Less than a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Less than a year.
Yep.
I mean, we went for coffee and I felt like I was sitting by my friend that I've had forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's
we were
just
there
been
for like 3 hours.
Yes, and it didn't even feel like it. We probably better go. So you guys, these two have such a cool story and we have to say this coming right out of the gate. How did this podcast?
We got to give them the formal introduction.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I get so excited and just keep talking. Yeah. Okay. So we have Jamie Curzio and his beautiful wife, Jamie Curzio, and we're going to let them tell their story. But will you please tell everyone how this podcast got its name?
Well, we originally talked about doing a podcast.
We knew the Lord called us to.
We didn't know what kind of podcast.
Didn't know what it was going to be.
Healthy with the Herities.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we're on because it's not that.
Yeah, no. But then we had them over for dinner.
Yes.
And as we were just sitting there listening to the story you guys will get to hear, I was like, man, this At the Table with the Herities, just sitting there talking at the table, just sharing stories of Christ and what he's done in our lives and all that. So here we are.
And so as the result, we knew these guys were coming on real quick, not only because they helped name the podcast, but it's their story, you guys. Yeah. It's truly their story. So they're going to start out by telling you how they met, how they both came to find and follow Jesus. And that's going to interweave several really cool pieces of their story.
Implants too.
Yeah, y'all.
They're not Oklahoma natives.
You guys moved here when? To Oklahoma.
April of last year. So April of 2013.
Oh, that's right.
And I was June of last year.
And I was June. What day did you move here? If I swear, if she tells me this,
May 26th.
The very end of May.
Okay.
Yeah, very end.
I was gonna say,
and I was June 11th. I'm going to be like, because we were floored right before we hit record, and I was like, this whole thing should have been recorded already. Oh my goodness! So we all moved here right at about the same time.
Yep.
The three of us on this side of the room. They'll tell you from where they're from, and you guys know I'm from Ohio. So, and now we're all Okies. Yep. About a year into being Okies.
And loving it.
Absolutely loving it.
We love
you
it.
might not be loving it.
No, he loves it. Yeah, we love it. Yeah, he loves it too still. Yeah. He's a native.
No, I meant you loving us.
No. You're on, dude. Come on.
So I'm going to hand it over to them and you guys, however you feel like you want to tell, whoever starts.
So we actually went to junior high and high school together.
Okay.
Did not hang out in the same circles. This guy over here was way too cool for me.
Okay.
He was the jock. I was the band nerd.
Oh, okay.
Love it.
So 5 years after high school, roughly.
Yeah, it was my 5th year of college.
We met through a mutual friend from high school.
Wow.
He was at a bar one night and we had friends that had their own band. And
don't air quote it. It was a real band.
What was the name? Or can you remember?
I was in the band.
Okay.
At one point. I got out of it at this point. It's called Planetary Nebula.
Okay.
That's a good band name. Yeah. That's very sciencey.
Yeah. You would appreciate a good band name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
why did we name it that, by the way?
I honestly don't remember.
No idea.
All right. So you were in the band.
Not at this point.
Okay.
But he would go to retired. He'd go to all their shows.
Well, they were friends.
So
you still would go.
Yeah.
You're all high school
friends.
So
I started hanging out with this mutual friend from high school. And so he invited me this one night, this mutual friend. And I could not find the place. I was lost in downtown Denver. So Jeremy, used to deliver Chinese food in downtown Denver, and
Okay.
he knew all the roads. So our friend puts him on, and he gives me directions, and I get there, and we just
see, we didn't know this cute little part.
Yeah.
Start hanging out that night, and he's buying my drinks, and then
that wasn't the
yes,
not the next day. I didn't. That's not that day.
Oh,
We went out a couple times.
okay.
I do this all the time. So I'm like, what?
Before you continue, what did you play in the band?
Guitar.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't play band in school? You didn't do band in school?
No.
But you did.
But you did.
But I did.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yep.
No. We were into a lot of the 90s grunge stuff.
Yeah.
And so after I guess it was like sophomore, junior year, we're like, we should do a band. It was like all, me and 3 other buddies.
Okay.
And formed a band, played not very good cover songs,
But come on, you did it.
Yeah, but
I love it.
No,
that's what I was wondering, because you had the musical talent of playing a band. It's like,
Right.
why didn't you do band? Well, I guess marching band's different than grunge
Because
band.
it's not cool.
It's not cool.
It's not
Not 90s grunge rock band in the garage, man.
Right.
we were trying to stick it to the man. We weren't, So we went mutually with a few friends, like we'd go out, hang out.
Okay.
And, it got to the point where, our mutual friend, I'd be like, hey, make sure you call Jamie. Make sure Jamie's going to be there.
Yeah.
That's a smooth way to do it.
Yeah, make sure she's there.
Yeah. But I realized I was going to need to get her number at one point. Why I thought this was the time,
This is
I don't know. But we went out, we got some drinks one night. I bought her drinks, and I realized I'm in college. I realized I overdrafted my account.
Oh, no.
Luckily, Jamie worked at the bank that I banked at. So I thought the next morning I really needed someone to waive these overdraft fees. So I went in.
Oh, no.
This is true. I went in and timed it so I'd get Jamie.
Yeah.
She's at the teller line.
Like, I need help.
Yeah.
Said, well, that was a fun night last night. The problem is kind of overdrew my account.
Buying you drinks. He throws in.
Oh my gosh.
Trying to stick to the facts. And so I said, is there any way you could waive these fees? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, I really appreciate it. And I said, can I get your number? Like literally the next thing I said.
After
because
my banks overdraft.
I mean, this is as bad as it gets.
Oh my gosh.
And the running joke is he knows I did not marry him for his money.
100%.
100%.
Overdrafting.
Literally in this case. So
okay.
She gave it to me. So at this point, she knew what she was getting into. And then we kind of started dating like after that.
Yep. And then as we started dating, so we are 5 days apart. Our birthdays are 5 days apart. Both of our parents were still together, which
very
is
rare.
Very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Both of our moms stayed home with us when we were younger.
Wow.
Our dads were 2 months apart. Our moms were like a year and
Like
2 months.
Yeah.
Our parents got married the same year. So
And our parents are good friends.
And our parents are good friends.
Yeah.
So like
So
all
amazing.
these things just kind of
Huh.
came together, and at the time you're like,
Love it.
this is cool.
Yeah.
So
But-
it worked out really well.
Yeah, we started dating and I got married 2 years later. Still didn't have any money.
Those weddings will do it to you.
Overdrafting. That's good.
We had to invite a lot of people to the wedding.
Yeah, for the money.
Yeah.
For the
just
money.
to
Goodness.
get to even.
Oh,
So we dated. We got married in 2006. We moved to Arizona before we got married.
Okay.
We lived there for 2 years and then moved back to Colorado.
That's right. I forget that piece.
Yeah.
So you grew up in what town?
We
Was
grew
it
up in
Littleton?
Littleton.
Littleton. Okay.
Yep.
We grew up in Littleton.
And did you
Colorado.
go to Arizona because of Amy and Jason?
Yeah, and her brothers and Amy and Jason.
Okay,
and,
I thought you guys said that. Yeah, you
but
knew people there. Your family was there. Yeah.
Family. I think my grandma was still both sides of my family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Family down there.
Wow.
So
Okay.
went
So that's
down
how you
there.
wound up down there? Okay.
Yeah, just we wanted something different.
And just,
remember?
something different.
Just
We were, mid-20s. We were like, well, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But we quickly
right.
realized, I quickly realized I could not take the heat.
It's too hot.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of heat in Arizona.
Yeah.
That was not
very
for
much
me.
is.
It's hot.
Desert hot.
Yeah.
So
and we just felt like, you don't appreciate something until you don't have it anymore.
Mhm.
So every time we would come back home to Colorado, we felt like we were in a small town. And we kind of wanted that for, we were talking about starting to raise a family. And so we didn't want to do that in Arizona. We wanted to be back in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, we lived in Phoenix. It was big. You know, where we grew up. I mean, it's changed a lot, but when we grew up, it was, I wouldn't call it a small town, but it had that feel.
Small feeling.
Yeah, and we didn't want to raise a family. And so we moved back to Colorado. And
you were down in Phoenix how long?
2 years.
2 years.
To the day.
Wow.
You're like, we're out of here.
Numbers have a lot. Good gravy.
So moved back to Colorado, and we decided to start trying to have a family. So, but you wanted to talk about our faith journey before we.
Oh, yes.
Into the
Well, I know your faith journey has to do with what you're about to talk about.
I'll start with mine. So I grew up in a Christian home. My grandparents were, everyone down the line. But I never really understood what it was to have a personal relationship with Jesus until probably the last 5 years. I was very involved in church. I went to youth group when I, up through 12th grade, very involved. Went to church every Sunday, mom and dad. Then I went to college and that
went off the rails.
Yep.
Happens in college.
Because I felt, and now looking back on it, I realize why. I was living my parents' faith. I wasn't living my own faith.
That's a good observation.
And I wasn't ever taught to have a relationship with Jesus through the church I went to. I was never really taught about prayer and the importance of it. My dad every morning would have, his Bible was constantly on the kitchen table. He had to be at work at 6 a.m. every morning. He would get up at 4:30 to make sure that he spent time with the Lord before he went to work. So I had that example, but it was never taught to me how to do that. So when I went to college, I was like,
when you need it the most.
Yeah. I was like, I don't need this. Well, I'd go to church on Christmas and Easter with my parents, but I was living a very sinful life. And I did that for about 10 years. When we met, that was a part of, not that we were like horrible people, but we weren't living a Christian life. We were very of the world.
Very in the world.
So we got married, and gosh, it was probably 2 years into our marriage, maybe a year. I felt this stirring in my heart to go back to church. I think it was really as we started talking about starting a family that I was like, okay. So I started going back to church. I became very involved in the church. I was a youth mentor for 4 or 5 years, just very heavily involved, and he was not going to church. And it was a pretty dark time in our marriage. I feel like, because he didn't understand why I was devoting so much of my free time to it. And I just remember just praying, God, please come into his life. And I had people who were helping me along the way, and they were, they're like, you can't be the one,
make him.
Right. You can help bring him, but you're not the one that's going to change this for him. So we decided to start a family, 2 years into our marriage, roughly?
Yeah.
Right?
2 to 3.
And that was a whole journey in itself. We tried for a year, because that's how long you have to try before they'll help with any intervention, doctors, and nothing was happening. So went to a reproductive endocrinologist, and they couldn't find anything wrong. So we're like, okay, well, I guess we'll just keep trying. We ended up doing 9 rounds of artificial insemination. That was a lot.
I'm
sure you had all the tests done on you too, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
And is it my problem or her problem?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
It's one of those, like, especially necessarily not being faithful. And just to kind of throw this out too, for the context of it, I always believed in God. My parents very loosely Catholic at the time. Like my mom would always want to go to church on Christmas, and my dad and I would try to give her reasons why we should stay home. Sometimes she'd win and sometimes we'd win. And it was very Christmas and Easter type thing. And I didn't understand. It just wasn't a thing growing up. It was like, I almost felt like, well, kind of Catholic, like, I don't know, it just wasn't a priority. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in God. But it had a lot of kind of going back to the music conversation we had before, like a lot of influences in my life at that time where it was like anti like organized religion or anti all this stuff, right? And so I had a lot of that influence, and yet I always believed in God. I got wrapped up in the wrong reasons not to pursue that. And so when Jamie was going back to church, I didn't necessarily want to go because it almost just felt like, well, that's what you do. Like we kind of go through this,
emotions.
And like now we're gonna have a family, and that's what you do, right? You bring you bring your kids to church, and that's what parents are supposed to do. I just didn't understand, and I didn't care that you were going per se. I think it was more as you got more into it, I didn't understand, right? And so then we're trying to have baby, and that's not happening. And we're looking at this from very two different perspectives, right? And that's hard, that's just that was a hard time to try to come together as a marriage. Looking at it now, trying to tackle something versus with Jesus in your life, guiding you, the Holy Spirit, versus that, it's you have to look back on it to understand
good point,
how difficult that task is going to be if you don't have Jesus with you, right? And so
difficult.
I think that just put a big strain, and then the stress, and that's like the worst thing when you're trying to have a baby. Stress kind of prevents that, but it's also like the longer this goes, the more stressful it is. So
double-edged sword.
Right.
Well, and going through all that for 4 years, come to find out I have endometriosis. So that was probably the biggest factor in us not being able to have a biological child. And that is a real disease, man. I've since had a complete hysterectomy. My life has changed. But I was a lot of physical pain for many years.
Wow.
And I think I'm still, to a certain extent, and I think I will for the rest of my life, deal with the grief, because I remember from the time I was 4 years old telling my mom, when you're talking about what do you want to be when you grow up, my answer was always a mother. And so even though I'm going to church and I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a Christian, I don't think I still had that personal relationship with Jesus at that point. And so I was angry. I did not understand.
I'm doing all the things.
A woman is made by God to bear children, and I couldn't do the one thing I was made to do. And it's I think, again, something I'll struggle with for the rest of my life.
Well, that has to bring a whole set of things that you have to process. Like that's a lens through which you look, and you have to really go, wait a minute, I've got to put my eyes on Jesus. I would imagine that's like, I think of my abuse in my house, and that wreaked havoc on it just a spider webbed out into everything.
Well, and now I look back on it and I see God's plan in why we weren't able to have biological
put your seatbelts on, my friend.
And I understand that now, but at the time, it was incredibly hard for me to walk through that.
Not just the female perspective of that. Did you ever feel like like you do the checklist, like as a Christian, I'm doing all these things, Lord, and now I can't have a kid, which,
what is this? What else do you want from me? Like, what if, in my case, sometimes it's, what did I do wrong?
Which we all do that. I'm doing all these things. He's like, that's not how it works. That's works. That's not how it works, man.
And I didn't get that. Just to throw us out real quick.
That's what I was thinking. because you grew up just Christian, like Bible reading Christian, and you had like a Catholic kind of ish background.
Right.
So those are two opposing
Yes.
into itself
Very
as
different,
well.
yeah.
So it's like, wow.
I didn't get the female perspective, right? Like I didn't get that aspect. I didn't get the religious aspect. And so I'm looking at this totally different than Jamie is. And that didn't help either, right?
Well,
So
what
it's
was your
Yeah.
I don't really remember it being anything other than it's just not happening, right? Like I didn't look at it from a it's not supposed to happen or I think
like you're being punished.
No,
or
yeah,
like
I didn't look at it like that. I think it was just kind of one of those like it'll happen if it's supposed to happen. And it was, I mean, it bothered me. It was obviously it bothered me for multiple reasons, but you know, to see Jamie as hurt as she was.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? Why can't we get this done? Like, you know,
this is what's
me? Yeah, totally.
Wow.
Right. But not her perspectives, right? So it's like really we're kind of on our own islands at this point. Like,
But,
that's a good way to put it.
We were kind of each on our own island, but yet they say infertility can make or break a marriage. We know so many people who have gone through it and it has not ended well. So it was weird. We were on our own islands, but yet we were still together and we felt like we were doing
I more meant
like I honestly feel like we were doing better going through that than even before we started going through it.
I agree. I more meant
which was
perspective wise, like our own islands as far as I think we worked well together. I think we were there for each other the best that we can be.
With incredibly heightened emotions. Come on.
Yeah.
That had to be so like you're managing your own emotions, but not trying to at that depth of emotion in me, I can try to push people away because it feels so crazy.
Yes.
But you guys managed to clearly just stay aligned and on the same team and wow.
Maybe on the same island, just maybe on opposite
sides.
ends. You're like one side of the island to the other.
And that island had 2 time zones. I don't know. It's weird. It was right on the edge there.
So how does your faith story come into, it's like we're getting into what happens as the result of not being able to have a baby.
Well, we talked, our options at that point became adopting or what was
in vitro.
And we talked about that. And I think we were pretty quickly on the same page. We weren't going to spend more like adoption's great. Let's go that route.
So this was before you had hysterectomy?
Yes.
Or you already
had a hysterectomy 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think we really debated that like more than a day.
Adoption
it was real quick.
So you felt you exhausted like every option, like this isn't going to happen.
Minus in vitro, but in vitro is so expensive and it's not covered by insurance. And so we were thinking if we're going to spend that kind of money, we would rather adopt, give a child a home and know we're going to walk out of that situation with a child versus even more heartbroken. Because we'd have had friends who've done in vitro and it didn't take, so
and it was so much failure. I mean, from a sense of like, we're not reaching our goal, right?
How much
like,
can you take in the pummeling while you're down?
Exactly. And it's like, this is a different path. And maybe that's, what God wants us to go. And I feel like I believed in God enough to be okay with that, right? Like I would look at that. And that's the thing. It's like, I always believed in God. I always believed God was looking out for me and for us. I mean, there's definitely enough things in my life to know that like God was protecting me. So
same.
That common grace. Common grace.
Exactly. So I wanted to follow that lead. And it seemed like we were on the same page.
The only thing we debated was he's like, let's do foster care. And I said, if I can't have like, and this is going to probably sound selfish, but I'm like, I need a baby. I need to be there from day one. If we can't have our own biological children, I need that. That's a need that I have. And, so we looked into foster care and the statistics where 80% of the children are put back with their
Ooh.
biological families. And
Foster parents are
I'm like,
something else.
Something
Oh, yeah.
else.
They
are
God,
saints,
thank you,
man.
Lord Jesus, for
Wow.
people who go that length.
we were not there. You know,
No,
I'm like,
not
It's
even.
just ripping your heart out.
I don't
You
know
get
that I
attached
could.
to
We
the
had
kid,
had
and then
enough.
it just ripped.
we had enough loss and
Mhm.
failure
We're
that
so
I'm
far
like,
behind
I
the 8 ball
can't.
at this point.
Yes,
that-
Yeah.
you are beat down, and
Yeah.
it's time to get up.
I'm like, I could not go through that. So that
You
was the
needed
only
some
thing.
sort of guarantee
Yes,
of
yeah.
something.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, yeah. So we decided to do the private adoption route, which is not and I don't want to make it about money, but it's not a cheap endeavor. So we started doing a lot of research. Personally, when we started this discussion, my thought was, I want a closed adoption. I want this to be my child. It was all about me. I want, not that I wouldn't tell them that they were adopted, but I wanted that relationship. I wanted to be the mom.
So for people that don't know the context of that, you're talking private adoption versus just putting your name on a list?
Oh, good question. Yeah.
And
well, so private adoption, basically as adoptive parents, you have to go through all these background checks and home studies and all this stuff. And then you create a book that it explains
it's like a profile
who you are.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who you are. You put a bunch of pictures in there.
Well, and just to answer, there's private or there's like foster care, right?
Okay.
So foster,
I
didn't know if there was a difference between that, or you just, hey, we want to be adoptive parents, and they just put your name on a list, and the next kids that need parents go,
no,
hey.
So to do private, you contact an agency.
Okay.
They say, okay, they do this whole paperwork process. You make your book. And then, the process usually takes, for private adoption, 2 years.
Wow.
That's if Jamie's not involved.
No, that's the standard.
No, that's the standard. Right.
That is the standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jamie's very good at paperwork and does not procrastinate like someone else.
So we made the decision in April to adopt. We had all the paperwork in early May, had our home studies, our home visits with the caseworker, everything, got that all done. We were ready by June.
And just to clarify what you were saying, there's private adoption, but then like you could have an open adoption, a semi-open, a closed, and that's more the relationship with the birth mom.
Right.
Got it.
So are the children going to see the birth mom and the family and
got it.
How much control? And so a closed adoption is like none.
No contact.
And that's what I wanted.
And that's what you wanted, right?
I was like, I want a closed adoption. I don't want any contact.
Well, you had enough loss, and I don't need one more.
Right. Yeah.
Which the reasons for that will come up in the story.
Yes. So we get all this stuff done. We make our book, give it to our agency, and
quickly,
2 weeks.
Yeah.
We get a call. We're like,
and this is like 3 months later, right? 3 months into the process.
About 3 months into the process.
Which normally is 2 years, you said?
Yeah, about 2. 1.5 to 2.
And you're like, we're getting this thing done.
Okay. And for whatever reason, our agency told us there was a huge influx of birth moms at that time.
Okay.
And not enough adoptive families. So that kind of played into it.
God's in the details.
Yeah. But so she's presenting us some of these cases of these birth moms, and there's so much to it, like all the legalities of if you adopt from out of state, and like every state has their own adoption
Those were
laws.
on the list as well? Out of state adoptions?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So we're
well, it's all about the agents, just to explain that. So people know, like the agency, there are going to be good ones and bad ones as far as finding moms that are looking to place their baby for adoption, right?
Yeah.
So you go to one agency, they might not have any, or they might have one or two, and get a lot of
well, and agencies will kind of talk to each other too. So if one agency, they don't have anyone that's a fit for that birth mom situation, they'll give it to another agency.
Wow.
It's definitely
I didn't know it could go across state lines. I thought it would be just within, like we're trying to adopt within Colorado.
Typically, I think people probably adopt within the state they live in, but there's definitely
I think it just comes down to what resources and connections your agency has, and feelers out in different places and that sort of thing.
But we were presented with 2 or 3 birth moms that were out of state.
Yeah.
And so we're like, preparing because, you know, you have to prepare to live out there for maybe a week or two when the baby's born. And like, you can't just take them from the hospital. Like, each state has their own laws as far as how quickly birth parents' rights can be terminated. And so, I mean, it's so convoluted and so confusing.
No control, and that's okay. I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just that's what it is, right? So your flexibility has to be 100%. You're going to go
flexible
when you go, and you're going to go where you go, and their laws are going to be what they are, and you don't have.
You are complying.
Right.
You have to
and
comply.
that's okay. I definitely don't want to make that sound like it's bad. It's just what it is. And so you're flexible, right? But we're okay.
Yeah, you'd hope they're doing right.
Clearly, when everyone hears your stories, they're going to know y'all are flexible. Wait till you guys hear this. It's a whole new level of flexibility.
So, So we go through all that process. They're presenting or not presenting, just giving us heads up that there's these different birth moms in other states.
Yeah, because the birth mom picks up.
Right. The birth mom is the one
that's choosing.
We're not choosing this.
Yes.
The
birth mom chooses
story.
the adoptive family. So in August, I believe it was, we got a phone call from our agency that a birth mom had picked us, which is very fast. We started the process in April and the baby was due in October. That's like 6 months. Like that's unheard of in the private adoption.
And it was in Colorado. It was in Colorado Springs,
in the
which
States.
is
The state we lived in,
30 miles from where we're living.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, not far.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome.
So we go and we do like a dinner meet and greet with the birth mom, and her dad's there.
Talk about being nervous. Just to throw that out. That's a nerve wracking. I don't get nervous in a lot of things. I was nervous.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So we go to dinner and it's her mom and dad, and she has a little girl already. Wow. So birth dad is in prison, and basically the grandparents are helping this birth mom raise her daughter already. And she just can't do it. She can't, you know.
This would be her second child.
Yeah. So we get to know her. We exchange phone numbers with her.
Went great.
Yeah. Went really well.
Great. Yeah.
We, you know, her and I start texting back and forth. And so then we make a plan. We met at a zoo one day and she took her little girl and we got to take all these pictures with her and her dad. Her dad really seemed to be the one that was driving
big time
the adoption.
Yeah.
Because he was
trying to get,
he was basically supporting her.
I think he understood that was probably the best
choice for that child as well.
Yes.
And he just genuinely good guy. I got to know him pretty well, and we would text a lot, and you know, he would check on us a lot, like just very considerate. Good guy. Yeah. I mean, all of them were, but I'm just saying he was just real genuine, and I think that really helped the process, especially just being in uncharted waters of like all of this. Any level of support or bonding, I think, was good. You know, it's just a good thing.
And I'm sure there was a little it's probably a huge underlying of pressure because you're wanting a child so bad. Like, we got to do everything to make this perfect so this happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a theme that we'll keep talking about where like you get so paranoid that anything you say or anything you can do can ruin this.
Blow it
up.
Right?
Can blow that up. Yeah.
Right. And so you're from that first dinner and talking about being nervous. It's like, it's one thing to look at a book and be like, oh, this looks like normal people.
But you're really in their space. You're really like, this.
You're being scrutinized.
Is this going to happen?
You're under a microscope.
Well, you should be. I mean,
for sure.
But you are. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we, you know, we're matched at this point, and have a little boy that is going to be due in October.
Yeah.
So we start working on the nursery. And I have a baby shower that some friends throw for me. It's called just an essentials only baby shower. So
it was October 7th was the due date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I just put together with, okay, we'll get to that. Anyway, so we do all this stuff. We're ready for this baby to come. And we're both still working full time at the time. And I get a call someday in October, the beginning of October, at work one morning, and it's our caseworker. And she says, Jackie had the baby, and she has decided to keep him.
Oh.
And I was like, huh? Yeah. So basically, birth dad got out of prison and convinced Jackie that they needed to keep the baby. Her dad was devastated. He called us. I mean,
well, you called me. Hold on.
I called Jeremy. We both leave work.
I mean, it's
obviously.
like 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, like it's early.
Yeah.
And I remember you calling, and I'm thinking like, oh, we're heading down to go pick the baby up. Right. Man. And I mean, you just hear, I mean, you barely talk.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was pretty devastating. And I remember just like getting up and like leaving work, like telling my boss, like kind of quickly, but I don't want to break down and get into it. You know, we're good friends, but it's like, I gotta get home. Right. So I remember getting home and just the unknown at that point, the loss of, it's like, no, this was supposed to be a safe route. Like you take adoption classes, right? We took these classes where they'll teach you about adoption and they'll do different, like this place was great. And they would have like, you know, the diaper changing class or whatever, but it was for all adoptive parents.
That's
so
awesome.
like, you don't show up.
Because you don't get that.
Yeah.
There's not advocacy for adoptive parents.
There's not a lot.
There's a ton of advocacy for birth moms, which I get there needs to be and there should be. But on the opposite end of that, there's also people who are wanting to take these children and love them as their own. And so,
well, we would go to this class and they would talk about these worst case scenarios or there's always a chance. And you're like, that's not going to happen to us. You know, I mean, it's just
like, no way, this is guaranteed.
And then all of a sudden you're living it.
Right. Like you're instantly like living that worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Did it feel like losing somebody? Did it have that kind of grief feel to it? Like you just lost a parent or something?
No, I think I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at God.
And I just started drinking, to be honest with you. I mean, that day, that was, to me, it was like, you got to be kidding.
The blow of all blows.
Just to give up. Right.
Yeah.
Really?
Right. It was just
serious?
like, I'm checking out today because I don't have the mental, not that I was drinking all the time or anything, but I just cleared that up. But like, that day was like, no. Like, this isn't how it's supposed to be, but that's fine. It's what it is, but I'm checked out. I'm giving up. We have gone through so much to get to this point. I mean, people have failed adoptions. They're hard. Like, you know, this isn't the only time this has ever happened type thing.
Right.
And I'm sure most of those people, or at least some of them, have also had the same fertility type issues or infertility type issues before. So it's not this like craziest thing in the world type thing, but it's just piling on, right?
Yeah. Well, and none of our friends had experienced infertility. We're the only ones. There was no history of it in either of our families. So to pile on to this, 2 weeks before the adoption failed, my sister and brother-in-law tell us they're pregnant.
Oh, you're like, great.
So that was, you know,
you're like,
we're so excited for them, obviously. And we had so many friends that were getting pregnant. And
it's just, oh my goodness.
Well, it's one of those like where we didn't know anyone who had gone through this. So there's no one to...
Who do you call?
Who do you call? Right. Who do you go to? Because there's a lot of things where, as bad as it is, you might have someone who's gone through it and can give you that perspective that only someone who's gone through it can give you. And we didn't. I'm sure they're out there. Obviously, they're out there. We didn't have that. So it was very... we're alone in this, right? And I don't think most of the people in our lives could understand, nor should they. I don't blame them for it, but it's not the type of thing
they've been through,
right? So it was a very, well, short-lived.
Well, in the context of what you just said, I have kids, but you guys went through, you can't have kids yourself. And then to go through this and then lose the kid again, it's like, gosh, you got people that just want to adopt because the Lord's hey, you want to adopt? You already have your own kids.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different level because they didn't go through you can't have it biologically. They've already had them.
Well, and I think to kind of what you just said, it's like you can't have kids. Now it's like you can adopt.
What are we doing?
What else is there?
We
There's
do
nothing
maybe to help contribute to change her mind or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Like, well, now we can't do this, you know, and I don't want to do this again. Like, that sucked. So I don't want to do, you know, we're just kind of done. I think what was good for our marriage was at least we were the only other person for each other that knew how we felt.
Oh, that's a good point.
At least
That's
you knew
a
each
good
other.
point.
So we really did bond through tragedy, which I'm not sure is healthy or not. But
no, it
you know,
absolutely
we had
is
enough time
healthy.
under our marriage that you know this was something that I think we really did bring us together.
Well, then go back to what you
God
said.
was
It could
setting
either
the
bring you
scene for
together
you.
or tear you apart.
Well, and looking back on it, the 4 years that we tried to have a biological child, that was time that God was refining our marriage, whether we knew that or not.
Totally right.
If this would have happened year 2 in our marriage, it
I don't know.
could have been a completely different story.
We needed that time, and you never see that in the moment.
No.
Obviously.
Never do.
It's
It's the trials.
Yeah.
It's the trials.
Yeah.
It was the training us, building our marriage, building the
He was
strength.
preparing you.
Mhm.
You didn't even know it.
Right.
You didn't even know it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to underplay what happened here. You guys prepared a room.
Yeah.
You had a baby room
Yeah.
ready, a baby boy room ready. You guys probably had already been talking about this is what we're going to do when we get the call. You may have been thinking about names at this point.
Oh, yeah.
This was a baby coming home
We
to
had our
you.
bag packed a week before, ready to go to the hospital.
So I, like, my spirit is saying, whoa, pump the brakes. That is real grief.
That's why I was asking it. Like
a loss. That's
did
a
it feel
loss.
like a loss of a parent or a spouse or
I don't
child?
think it did because of how quickly we were then.
Right. I don't think we had time.
I mean, it was devastating.
I think it was
Or
different.
are you just in shock? Like,
Yes.
what
I think it was
is
more
going on?
Complete shock.
And I think it was, I haven't lost a parent, but lost some pretty close people. And it's different in the sense that, like, I don't think it was on our radar that it would happen.
Right.
Like it was ever going to happen.
Well, we never saw this child.
Yes,
I've
right.
I've heard of people who physically hold the child and see the child.
That's a whole nother
then
level.
The birth mom changes.
Okay.
Oh, goodness
So
gracious.
I think God spared us
hard.
in that situation of not ever actually seeing the child. Because that would have
And I think it's one of those, like, you know how grief doesn't always hit you right away.
It did,
right?
Yeah.
And I think we were in shock. And so basically that was the 7th. So Amy Burton, who you guys know, that's my cousin. She's supposed to be, she's marrying Jason. She is marrying, that's supposed to be. She is marrying Jason on October 22nd. And so we weren't going to go. The way it was in Arizona. We were in Colorado.
Okay.
We weren't going to go to the wedding because we're going to like a 2-week-old kid. And I don't even know if we can go. Like, I don't think we can, like, bring the kid out of state. Like, it's just not happening. So we weren't going. And then that happened. I'm like, we're going down there. We got to just get away. Let's go to the wedding and just get out of town.
Yeah,
so we go down, went to the wedding, and the agency called and checked in, and they said, what are you doing? I said, we're down in Arizona. And they said, well, come up. We just wanted, our counselor, I just want to see you guys, check in on you, give you a hug, that sort of thing.
She lived on the way on our drive home from Arizona in Colorado.
Because we drove, because it was last minute, we're going to go down there.
Okay.
So we driving back up, we're going to stop at the agency. And
on my birthday.
On Jamie's birthday. That's right.
Okay.
And great wedding. It was a good wedding.
Jason and Amy, good job, guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're coming back up and we stop. And I didn't want, did you want to? I didn't want to. I mean, you're on like an 11-hour drive. You just want to go home at that point.
Well, plus,
you were like
plus you were probably numb. Like,
yeah. I honestly, I was like, okay, fine,
whatever
we'll go.
you want to do, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, so we're at her house. She invites us into her house and we're just talking through the failed adoption and stuff. And she's like, well, I have a new potential birth mom for you. I mean, this is 2 weeks.
You're like,
you know, we're like,
You had
Do
to
it
shaking your head
again.
like,
okay. And everything, all the advice we had heard after the adoption failed was you need at least a year, like get back into the process.
start, yeah.
You know,
this is
Just
2
like,
weeks.
man.
And she was like, and I actually agree with, she was on the, no, get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Oh, okay.
I don't,
Oh, the
counselor.
our
Yeah.
caseworker. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I don't know.
God
That-
used that. God used
did.
that.
Yeah,
He did.
totally. And I think it was good.
Yes. Yeah. Well, obviously.
No, obviously, but I think just at that point for our mental state to
Yes.
get back focused,
Yeah.
right? Because you give up. I think the longer you get into that grief,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The longer
Maybe
you stay
the
Did
there.
you have
you-
some
Yeah.
hesitation though when she said that? You're like, I don't know
I
about
don't-
Yeah,
that.
what in the world went through your
I
mind?
don't remember. So we're sitting at her table in her kitchen, and she's telling us about this potential birth mom.
And you're just like,
And she's like, and you know, she's talking. She's like, and it's twins, and she just keeps talking. And like a few minutes later, Jeremy's like, wait, did you just say twins? 'Cause
you
that's-
really slipped that one in there.
she's just like, twins,
Yeah,
real quick,
twins
like,
and blah blah blah, and that's not very common in private.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
twins is not very
Yeah.
common. So Jeremy's like, okay, wait, did you just say twins? And she's like, yeah. And he said, I don't mean to be insensitive, but does that cost double? Because like I said,
It's a
private
fair
adoption is
question.
not cheap. And what people don't realize with adoption is the agency isn't, they're nonprofits. They're not
okay.
they're not in this to make money. So the money that you're paying, I mean, at that time, the private adoptions were about $25,000. So we
The
lost
majority of that money goes to the birth mom,
to the birth
right?
Yeah.
mom
Like, these
to
birth
pay
moms
medical
are in-
expenses, rent if she
Mhm.
needs it.
Yeah, a lot of times.
So we had invested $5,000 into the first birth mom that
Mhm.
we don't get back. It's just gone.
Oh my.
That's another layer that you don't
Yeah.
even think about too. It's
yeah,
like,
right.
Plus all the money spent trying to have a child.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
we
I bet
have
y'all-
no money at this point.
he's
No,
overdraft.
Well, my
No,
goodness,
he's way
you-
overdraft.
Jamie's
that
not
was
working.
the foreshadowing.
He's
too.
way overdraft.
Jamie's not working at the bank, so I can't even
Yeah,
get
no.
these overdraft
No.
fees taken care of.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had two sets of parents that
Yes, that were very
wanted grandkids.
Yes. Very
They're like,
generous.
"Here you go."
Very, very
Yeah.
helpful
Yeah.
with that.
Aw.
Yes.
Yeah. So she presents this to us, and we're like, okay. She's like, do you want to meet this birth mom? She tells us
It was not double. Just
No,
the
it was
cost.
not.
It was
The cost
the
was
same.
not
It was-
double.
yeah,
I just want-
It's per pregnancy.
it's-
So she's like, she tells us, she's like, she has looked through probably 50 to 75 profiles, and you guys are the one that she wants to meet.
Wow.
And we're like,
Is
well,
she going to give you
thanks.
time to think about it, or just like,
Well,
hey,
she
we need
did.
to? Like,
She
right now?
did. So we didn't end up meeting Lexi
Well, that was
until
your birthday, so
Yeah.
that was October
24th.
24th.
We ended up meeting Lexi November 1st. We met her
So
for
it's pretty
dinner.
fast.
So it was
A
about
week
a week.
later.
So it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
They
We
didn't give
took
you a
a
whole
day-
lot to think about it.
Well,
It took a day or two to like think about whether we wanted to meet with
Do we
her,
want to
but
try this again? Yeah.
I think it was pretty obvious to us we did, though,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
There was
remember
no
it.
hesitation, really.
I don't
just like,
feel
no.
like there was.
I think at that point it was just,
We're already beat down straight
Yeah.
down.
And yeah,
what's the worst that can
right,
happen?
right. We've already
know the
had
feeling.
Well, little did we. You say that now. What's the
Yeah,
worst
That
that
was
could
kind of the
happen?
joke.
Yeah. So we meet with her, and it went great.
Went to dinner.
Went to dinner, and we left. And a caseworker is always present when you have these meetings.
Okay.
Yeah,
So.
right.
Before we leave dinner, she's like, okay, we'll contact you once Lexi's made a decision. Lexi and I had exchanged numbers, and she texted me that night and said, I want you to be the twins' parents.
Mm.
So
So we're back.
like, okay, here we
We're
go.
running again. We're back again.
All the
Back in the
chips
world.
are
Running
back in.
again. Yep.
Now we're doing double.
And
the
that's
measure.
where I
Oh
think
my Lord. Now it's like, oh, you
there wasn't a
guys.
lot
yeah.
of time. I think that's the point, is we just didn't have any time to really grieve or think
Right.
about.
Because
Mhm.
now we're on
So
to
if you think about that, would it have changed your thought process if you had given it more time in between?
it could have.
Mhm.
Like your decision would have been like, I don't know.
I think we would have been more hesitant.
More time to get in the fear of what if it doesn't work.
I feel like at least for me, I was still numb at that point, and I'm like,
that's what,
okay,
well, let's go.
Right. I mean, it really was numb.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just this like, I said it jokingly, but it was like, well, we've been through that. Right. So what else can happen?
The odds of 2.
What's it get? Yeah.
Right.
Like,
nobody's that unlucky.
Yeah. So dinner went great. She tells us she wants to be the parents. So
they were due in February.
They were due February 7th. That baby was
That's my sister's birthday.
Oh my God.
Of course it is.
and then they're born on
So they're due February 7th. We go about our normal lives, back at work now. And 2 days later, I get a phone call from Lexi that her water broke at 26 weeks. It was Isaiah's sac that broke, which he now to this day is proud of, that he was the one who broke the sac.
Yeah.
It was me.
It's a point of pride
it's
for
no
him.
coincidence he's our impatient child.
Yeah, he's coming out.
Yeah.
That didn't change.
So she's in northern Colorado.
Well, you call me. It was the day her water broke. Jamie called and said, Lexi's water broke. And I think guys think at that point is like the baby's coming.
I think that too.
Because that's typically
but I don't
what happens.
I don't know anything about premature births or
how many
premature
months,
right.
So she's what, 4 months, 5 months?
She was 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no clue that's a problem. Right.
Yeah,
I
3
just
months
thought
early.
Yeah.
they're early. I really had no concept.
I don't
of
think
this.
either of us really grasped
No,
what that
but
meant.
you probably
I don't. I mean, I know that's not good, but
Right.
I literally thought they were coming home like later that weekend.
You're like, okay. Yeah.
And all I could think of is we only have one room ready.
The practical.
What are we going to do? I thought we had till February to get the second room.
3 more months. I mean, that is time. That's
a
time.
significant chunk of time.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good way to put it.
Jamie caught me up to speed real quick.
Yeah.
Said, no, that's not how
It's
it
not
works.
good.
No, it's not good.
It's not good.
So
the plan was basically they're going to keep her from going into labor as long as they can. So she's now in the hospital.
They told her, plan on being here on bed rest until your due date. This was November 3rd.
And she was due February 7th.
And she was due February 7th.
2 days after we met her. Yeah. So it was
2 days after we met her. So we're like, okay, well, let's get to know her. So we ask if we can come down to the hospital and visit her because she's just stuck here.
Yeah.
She also has 2 older kids at the time that are 2 and 4.
Wow. So
she's trying to, the whole reason she was placing them for adoption is because she's like, I can't take care of 4 children. So she's there with her 2 and 4-year-old, and other people are trying to help her, but it's just kind of this disaster. So
they airlifted her.
They airlifted her from northern Colorado down to Denver.
So she's not really close to where she lives, and a lot of her friends are. I mean, it's not far, but it's probably at least an hour and a half-ish.
Wow.
You know, it's northern Colorado.
Yeah.
They airlifted her to Denver, so
she's kind of alone-ish.
Yeah. So, because they
that was
have
her only options.
This particular hospital has one of the best NICUs in the country, so that's why they want to keep them in as long as possible because the amniotic fluid can regenerate itself. So that's like, we need to keep them in, but the big risk is infection. So that's why
it's just this constant monitoring. See
they're
what
constantly monitoring.
Makes sense. Yeah. Right.
So we visit her in the meantime before they're actually born. And her best friend at the time was a professional photographer. So her friend said, I would love to do like a maternity shoot with you guys and Lexi while she's in the hospital. So we get that opportunity. We get to take pictures of the 2 of us with her, us holding her belly, like hands on each side. And it was just really sweet. I'm really glad that we got to do that. So that was a Thursday night, and the next day I'm driving to
and just real quick on the Thursday, like the conversations Because we just met her, right?
That's actually what has been stuck in my head for about 5 minutes. So I'm like, did they say 2 days prior they met her? And I'm like still processing this right now.
So it's this weird, like, we're trying to get to know her. She's trying to get to know us on this.
On a better personal level, not through a book.
Right. A situation that has now been expedited.
Right.
Exactly. Right. So that Thursday night, I just remember that was the first time, if I remember this right, that was the first time where it didn't feel horribly awkward.
Right.
Okay. Nice.
Like, there's not a lot of guys who are putting their hand around.
Yeah, I know. That would be kind of weird.
It was, but it wasn't as weird as...
I'm thinking that'd be weird.
I never even thought about that. I was just like, oh, we're doing this.
It'd be different if it was your wife. But like,
No, it was weird, but they're also like, it didn't feel like as weird as it probably should have.
Yeah. Okay, so we understand that.
There was, I think for both of us, very like younger sister want to protect her from right? Like that I didn't horribly feel with the first one. I think she had her dad and she didn't necessarily need that role.
Right.
With Lexi, it was very much like within that 2 weeks in the hospital, going to visit her, getting to really know her to the point where I was like, at least okay to be able to like do that. Was weird, but like I didn't say no either. I probably would have like the week before.
Oh, come on.
How about you two? I'll take the picture. And so that was Thursday night. That was November 17th.
Yep.
And then
so it's a Friday. I have off work and I'm driving to get my oil changed and I get a phone call from Lexi and I'm in labor. So her body just naturally went into labor at 28 weeks. So this whole time she's in the hospital, all we keep hearing is if we can get them to 28 weeks, it will be so much, their chances of survival
like they'll have a real chance
so much better because the lungs, and this whole time she's in the hospital, they're giving her shots of things to help quickly develop the boy's lungs and stuff like that.
Like steroids.
So she's like, I'm in labor. You need to get to the hospital. So I call my best friend at the time, and I was like, the babies are coming. And she's like, calm down. They're not going to go home today. They were 2.5 pounds each when they were born. I mean, like 14 inches long. I mean, tiny. So
you called me.
I called
eventually
him.
After she called all her friends.
I did call my best friend first. I was like, what do I do? They're coming.
Oh my goodness.
I'm missing one call. Who should I call here?
There's somebody I need to call.
Who did I call?
Yeah. So back to the whole picture thing. To me, that was God's timing. The night before they're born, we get to take these pictures that the boys will have for the rest of their lives to know that we love their birth mom and we have a relationship.
And I think our attitude, correct me if I'm wrong, between open and changed adoption.
I was just going to say.
Okay. That. Yeah. Really started to change during this time where I was more indifferent to it, but Jamie was definitely like on this, I want to have a closed adoption. And the adoption agency, you have zero perspective of that world. You are looking at it selfishly only because you don't understand the world and you're looking at that adoption world. You're just looking at it from your perspective. So all you know. But as talking to the agency and starting to look at this more and then meeting Lexi, our minds very much changed on the openness of the adoption.
Well, and I think I mean looking back, I think God softened our hearts.
Surely.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's a healthy relationship, it wasn't about what's best for us.
It went from what's best for us to what's best
for the
kids.
children.
Only he can do that. Yeah. Only he can do that.
So we rushed to the hospital. She has no one there with her.
Yeah.
So we get there. We're talking to her. I mean, she's having contractions and we're, holding her hand and trying to be there for her. And she's like, okay, what are their names? Tell me their names. What are we naming them? Because they'd been referred to as baby A and baby B until then. So we told her the names and she said, okay, I think.
No, we said baby A was Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
Baby B was Isaiah. And she said, I love the names, but switch them.
Yep.
So okay,
Yep.
we will switch.
Fair enough.
So
Fair enough.
So we did.
So we switched them, and baby A became Isaiah, baby B became Hunter.
So we're like, okay, we've got their names. Great. And so contractions started coming a lot quicker.
And it was serious.
Yeah. The baby's heart rates were plummeting. And so they're like, okay, we need to do this now. So a nurse comes in and throws scrubs at me because Lexi wanted me and only me to be in the delivery room with her.
Wow.
So
it just happened so fast,
It's
right?
so
Like, because she was fine.
Put the scrubs on.
When we got there,
okay.
it was fine and calm, and she's talking about names,
Yeah.
and then I don't know, some number changed or something, and they went into quick,
well,
we're on
it was Isaiah's number that changed.
Right.
Yeah.
We're now in Grey's Anatomy, and like,
we gotta. It's emergency
changed.
Now, code whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, they threw the scrubs
She's
at
like,
you.
put these on. I'm like, okay. So I put them on. I'm changing as fast as I can. It literally took me like 45 seconds to change, and I come out and they're hauling her out of the room already.
Like,
so
okay, here we go.
I'm going, and I go, and they have me put the little surgery cap on and the booties and all this stuff. And so I walk in, they've got her all prepared. And so I just sat with her because she was really scared, so I'm just sitting with her behind the sheet, and my heart's just breaking for this girl who's going through, we don't know each other that well. She's going through this major life thing, and she has no one there for her, but
just
me.
The emotions that she had to be experiencing. And
like on every level, she has a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and she knows she needs to give these kids up. And she has nobody there for her when she's going through a very premature labor.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So they, get her open, everything, and they pull baby Isaiah out, and he's not breathing. So they rush him into, they have 2 beds,
like
for each of them.
Type thing.
So they rush him over there. I don't get to see him at all. There's 8 doctors.
There's literally 8 doctors
trying to resuscitate him.
And
so I don't get to see him at all. It's just a blur. And then they take Hunter out and they put him on the table, and he's breathing, and they let me cut his umbilical cord. So, and I mean, it's just this baby that's this big. It's crazy. So I cut the umbilical cord, and then they take both of them out of the room. And we didn't see him that night, did we?
Yes, we did.
We did? I don't even remember.
Well,
but I was more, honestly,
caring
in
for
that moment. I was more worried about her.
Man, Lord.
Yeah.
And so so they put everything back together, and she goes into recovery, and she's
C-section.
Emergency
C-section.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's in recovery for a couple hours. And I remember walking out of the operating room and taking all the cap and booties off. And I didn't want to leave her. I felt bad because at that point, I didn't feel like they were my children. I hadn't even really seen them. And I just felt bad for this girl who was now in recovery and alone.
Well, and our perspectives of this 30 minutes, whatever it was so different because her boyfriend's there and Jamie goes in with him. Well, so it's me and the boyfriend just sitting in her room.
Oh,
right?
God.
Bring it.
We had
Bring
met
it.
him.
I need to hear it. We did not hear about this
You're
part.
like, what's up,
I
dude?
don't think we had met him
Yeah,
yet
I think
either.
this literally met this guy 15 minutes ago.
Awkward.
The stuff you have been through.
Well, and sorry,
Go
back up a little
ahead.
bit. The time she was in the hospital before they were born, the boy's birth dad, we had not met the birth dad yet, but they were still in communication.
So this isn't the birth dad. This is the boyfriend.
This is the
This is
boyfriend.
a different boyfriend.
This
Right, this is
boy.
not the birth dad.
Yeah. So
And it's not the dad of the birth dad
the
of
two
older.
of the 2 older
It's a
children.
different guy.
She's got a tough story.
Yeah.
She's got a tough story.
So we haven't met the birth dad, but she was telling us that he had come, when we're going to visit her, that he had come to visit her several times while she was in the hospital. That terrified me because I'm like, okay, this is the first scenario over again where the birth
Because they
dad
were not together.
steps into the picture.
Right.
And now they're
going
going
to
she's going to change her mind.
Oh, my goodness.
So I remember that was terrifying. I'm like, okay.
But she had this other boyfriend. He was a nice guy, but they run off and it's like,
Hey,
how's
dude.
it going?
Yeah.
Hey, guy, how's it going?
Nice to meet you.
Right. And I mean, I can kind of talk to anyone, but that was a challenge, right? I mean, it's
You're
just
like,
such a weird.
thrown in.
I'm still getting over last night's photo shoot, and
Yeah.
Now here's today's
Traumatized.
challenge.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of talking, but he seemed like a good guy. And I did, in all seriousness, say, okay, this is something good in her life.
Good.
And that's a good
Praise
thing,
God.
right? And we're trying to see how this kind of plays out. But I just thought, well, this is a good influence in her life.
Yeah.
It seems like a pretty decent
It's
person.
a fatherly thing. You guys somewhat took that role for her.
Yes.
Quickly started
Parents.
looking at
We
this as a parent, older brother,
Yes.
someone
Yeah.
to care for her,
She
Yes.
needed
protect
it.
her.
Yes, she needed that
Yeah.
love and
Yes.
protection.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't think, well, I wasn't even in the room. So I don't think we understood how sick they were. I mean, maybe you did if he wasn't breathing, but I'm in the room, I don't know what I don't know. And in my mind, I don't have the capacity to worry at this point anyway, because it's just been a crazy few weeks, right? So we did see him that night. And I remember she had some friends end up showing up. And I remember they all wanted to see him, and they're in the level 3 NICU. And so if you don't know, that's the intense one.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the
Not
Very
just anyone
intense.
can go in
No.
there.
I mean,
and the babies that are in there, I mean, you've got babies that are like
it's all
20 weeks.
They're in like incubator kind of looking things.
Well, the
Yeah.
boys were in incubator. Yeah, they're all in incubators, and like they literally can be doing a surgery.
Whoa.
They're not in like your own room. It's just a room, and there might be 12, depending on how many babies, and you could be in there visiting your kid, and they'll have a surgery going.
Yeah, it's like a microbiome within itself.
Oh, yeah.
Inside that little,
Wow.
Yeah.
There were
little
twins that were in the isolates. That's what they call the NICU beds next to the boys. And one of them didn't make it while the boys were in there.
Right. You would
so
go.
it can be very, very dire and very grave.
Right. And so it's
very touch and go in there.
Yeah. And like if something happens, they just kick you out. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing emergency surgery. You're out. So
it's life or death.
Right.
It's
this
life or
isn't
death.
like,
life or death.
we want to see the kids.
We want to see the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
So her friends show up. They're like, oh, we want to see the babies. And we're like, well, no.
That's not,
no.
they're not in that position.
Well, and I will say, as the hospital staff, not everyone is understanding of adoptions and the situations. Some hospitals are very accommodating, and they'll give the adoptive parents their own room the night that the baby's born.
Wow.
Our hospital was not that accommodating. Lexi told me the next day that one of the nurses was trying to convince her to not place her children for adoption.
Whoa.
While she was
going through all this.
Yeah. So
she had no idea of the story.
Right. That adds a whole nother level. Like, we didn't know what to do. Like, that night, our caseworker came to the hospital and we're like, do we go home? Like,
we have no idea.
What
we're
are
in limbo
we doing here, you know?
Well, and I was kidding, but like the reality is it's like, well, what else can happen? Like, we already had a failed adoption. Like, didn't have this on the bingo card of what's going to happen.
That was the what else.
Right.
Come on.
Exactly.
Well,
and so you're just again in this spot that you have no idea what to do. You have no one to call to say, what did you do? And I don't think there is a right thing to do. I mean, it's certainly situational based, so it doesn't matter anyway, but to go through like that and then try to like figure out, well, what's appropriate? What space do we give? Then realizing, like, I remember meeting with the doctors that night, and it was not nearly as positive, like, prognosis as I think I was expecting.
Like, they were in bad shape.
They were in a lot worse shape than, especially Isaiah, than I think we expected them to be. Like,
what were they telling you?
Like, hopefully we're trying to make it through the night type stuff.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
They had to put Isaiah on a ventilator. That it's awful to see someone on this that literally their entire body is just shaking because it's
he's 2 pounds. He was born 2 pounds 6 ounces. It's literally it's shaking them, and
it's probably trying to get the lungs cleared and keep them clear and all that stuff.
Surely, but it's a little teensy weensy thing you're watching.
Well, and I think the doctor recognized what was happening, and it was more like, hey, I got to communicate this with Jamie and I.
Well, and it was interesting too. That was another aspect. Some of them were hesitant to share anything that was going on with us because of HIPAA and the fact that we were not the birth parents.
And I think
so that was a whole other layer.
And I think in a more normal traditional birth, that stuff gets worked out beforehand.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't in this case because of how fast it was. So there was that. And then there was really just kind of dependent on the doctor and the shift and what they...
if he was feeling kind or not.
Yeah, or whatever they knew. I mean, half the doctors probably not even on their radar. And, but I remember talking to the doctor and it was a lot more like, what's the plan, doc? And he's like, well, we're going to try and make it through the night. I was
like, what?
Yeah. And that's where my faith journey kind of entwines.
Okay.
So I remember getting home that night. And I remember at this
you guys
point,
did leave.
We did.
Decided to go ahead and
give us
all
a
that.
room. So we
so you're like, just go home.
We kind of had.
What are you going to do? Like just stand the whole night in a room?
Right.
So you just kind of told her good night. And...
Yeah.
We'll
she was recovering. And
she was out of it.
She was pretty out of it. And we can't stay in the room with the kids. They're in this crazy. So there really was nothing at this point but to go home. And I remember going home and I remember laying in bed and just realizing like, pretty quickly as I was laying there, not a chance I'm going to be able to do this on my own. Just, it's not going to happen. And I remember praying, and I would pray at this point, right? I just wanted to make sense of this. But I realized every time I pray, I'm asking God for something. Something's not going right, and I need something. And I remember laying there that night and thinking, this is not what a relationship with God is supposed to be, right? This is me being, I need you when I need you. That's not a relationship.
No, it's
right? That's me just saying, you can come into my life when I need you, but that's
when I ask you.
When I ask.
Yeah.
And I remember laying there that night and I just thought, I'm not going to do this on my own. I can't. I mean, we're so far behind the 8 ball at this point, like just mentally and just who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. And there's going to be a lot more prayer. That I know. Right. But I realize I want Jesus in my life. Right. I always just believed in God. I didn't have this, what Jesus has done for me on the cross. I didn't have, none of that was on the radar at this point. It was just, I know there's a God. I know there's something more than this. And I know that I go to God whenever I need something.
That was me in my 12-step program for 13 and a half years.
Right.
Did not know Jesus. I had a God. I believe in God.
Right.
Yep.
And it was convenient. And I think that's the thing, right? It's like, hey, I'm not an atheist. I believe in God.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a good person.
There's a difference with the relationship with Jesus.
That night. That's the thing. I
Crazy
felt that
Father.
night that I need Jesus, right? And I need to listen to God. This is a two-way. It's not just me going to him when I need something. It's not just bail me out again. It's a true relationship with Jesus. And so that night I remember laying there and I said, I want Jesus in my life. I want to be Christian in the sense that I believe in Jesus. I believe that, and I still didn't understand. I was very new to religion, obviously at this point, like 4 minutes old.
I don't think you had to. You were asking him into your life.
That's the simplicity and beauty of it. Is like, it just, you ask him in and it's like, you
open the door.
You came.
Yes.
Yeah.
You came and I had to come to realize you were immediate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had to catch up with that.
Right. No, but you're totally right. And I just remember thinking, I just want to obey. I remember that being a big part because I have dictated this to, I just want to believe in God. I'll be a good enough person. I'm not going to kill anyone type mentality. Right. And I remember the switch flipping a bit to where it went to the switch flipping to where I want to be a child of God. I want to be following Jesus. I don't necessarily know what that looks like, what that means, but that's what I want. And that's what I'm going to need to get through this.
You're giving him control.
I remember exactly laying there and going, I don't want control of this. Please take this. Because I know, A, I don't have the capacity. B, even if I did, this is serious.
I don't know what to do. Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Whatever you say.
You don't have any control on an adoption. We learned that already. I know nothing about the medical world. Literally.
through all of those things, preparing us for the birth of the boys and for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was that, you know, it was just this moment, you know, where I surrendered to Jesus and I said, I've tried to do it my way. That clearly isn't working. And I'm sorry that I just come to you selfishly when I need something. And I remember feeling pretty bad about that. But I also remember a peace in this laying in bed this night, everything happening. I truly remember a peace that just when I really just called Jesus into my life, I felt this relief. Like I really did. I felt that we had a long road ahead of us, but it was going to be okay. I don't know how, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that something much greater than me is now in control.
Yeah.
The picture is you're in the driver's seat, you get out and you let him sit down and now he's driving and you're going, you got it.
Yeah, quickly you realize he's a way better driver.
And you're so relieved that you no longer
now
have
I don't have to drive. I can just kick back and you know, do what you're supposed to do. But now I don't have to worry about keeping it inside the lines.
But not one of us could sit here right now and say we haven't tried to get back up in that driver's seat, maybe today. Today, Lee surrendered. Now we understand that it's just a posture. It's a posture of surrender, a posture of obedience. Your heart.
Absolutely.
And it's when it's not something crazy, it's easy to forget that. Right. I think when we have great tragedy or something.
Right. Oh yeah.
It's
I've said that on every podcast.
He just said that to me. He's like, this might be weird, but I'm not upset that I have skin cancer again because it's the cancer that continues to bring me close to him. I'm like, stop saying that.
Sometimes when you're sick or you're suffering, you got two choices. You can go either one or the other. You can either get closer to him or push further away.
Well, and we had the opposite. I pushed farther away.
Yes. We had a very...
Now, where were you at in the bed and you didn't know he was doing this? I didn't even
know this happened.
Wow. Wow.
Honestly, this is the first time hearing it.
We've been accused of not being the best communicators.
So you didn't tell her about it that night or anything?
Eventually I told you I wanted Jesus in my life. I just didn't get into that.
But the detail.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This podcast brings detail.
Awesome.
Yeah. God brings detail.
It's details for sure.
No, but isn't that amazing, that peace that you get?
Just to backtrack for my life, there's been moments of tragedy that I did not realize God was working in that I do now. Right. And so we had a good friend. Jamie went to elementary school with him and we all went to high school together and his name was Isaiah. And we were playing football one day. We were 21 and it was right after 9/11. I just don't know why I remember that, we're playing football and he had a brain aneurysm. But it was playing like backyard, like in the park football, like no pads or anything. And he had a brain aneurysm in front of us and he died. He went into a coma. So they rushed him, we call 911, we rush him to the hospital. And remember, we all get to the hospital, right? And his dad's there. And his dad is so much more concerned with us than what's going on with his son. Right? Wow. How are you guys? He's just like the superhero that I had never seen this before. This dude's they're like, he's brain dead. He's not going to make it. They're keeping him alive for like family to get there type thing. And here's his dad going up to all of us. How are you? Can I pray for you? What do you need? And what I realized is this was a very strong Christian man. And I remember so impacted by this that, and I knew this, I said, I want that strength. Right. And I didn't walk away from this experience becoming a Christian, but there was a seed planted in my life. Right. And it's kind of cool because we named Isaiah in a big part after him. Right. And I just said, however he got that strength, I want it. And there's a couple others, I won't go into all of them, but moments like that, that those seeds, I don't think without those seeds, I could just lay there that night.
No, you don't.
You got to come back to those and you got to remember these just crazy things that have happened in your life.
Yeah.
Well, he brings it back to your,
they
almost like come flooding back to your, like, oh, wow.
Yes.
Like, he brings it into,
It just struck me as you were talking about this. there is like an even bigger theme of loss and disappointment with loss that just got connected for me. I mean, that's kind of a theme of both of your stories. Do you want to talk about Columbine?
I can. You're not as...
I mean, I think it's...
God just connected that for me. That there is depth to the loss that you have experienced.
Yeah.
I mean, we absolutely can talk about it. I just was going to say real quick.
Yeah.
For me, the theme is like worst case scenario happens. Like that's the theme. I've kind of like, there's just these weird things that worst case scenario, it's like, oh, what's the worst that can happen? Then it does. And so, yeah, I mean, we absolutely,
but what's going to end up coming out is the Lord is praised in the midst. Like you have learned
that their hedge of protection.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. And he was planting seeds well before the boys.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Well, and really side note. So Jeremy actually ran into our friend Isaiah that passed, ran into his dad in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Recently.
Wow.
Within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And got to tell him that we named one of our children after his son.
Which was really...
That's awesome.
Great.
I mean, never seen him any time before that.
That's awesome.
The problem was, and I felt bad. I mean, I'm glad I got to have this experience, but it was in the checkout line at the grocery store, and he got
all these really weird moments.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, Mr. Martinez, I don't know, you probably don't remember me, but I'll just remind him who I was. And I said, I just got to show you something. This is my kid. His name's Isaiah, and he lost it. Like I didn't probably think that through, because clearly that was
a bad thing.
Yeah,
no,
it
wasn't.
It might have been a layer of healing. Maybe.
I hope so.
I
hope so. But and I just told him, I said, your strength through that was such an inspiration to me, and I, would have loved to have been able to have that conversation in more depth to tell him through his biggest tragedy what
planted a seed
to
oh, he got it
and affected your eternity.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Woo! Yeah. Yep.
Some silver lining. I mean, it
all matters
for a Christian. I think that's something to walk away from and understand a bit.
Oof.
But so we graduated from Columbine High School in 1998, the year before the shooting.
So we were not there.
We were not there.
Yeah.
We both went to the same college for a semester too after high school, and still didn't know each other.
Crazy.
But he had come, so that was the first semester.
Yeah, failed.
The first semester we were at the same college, but then he was back down in Littleton at that point.
I was coaching.
He was coaching
at Columbine. I was coaching with our mutual friend that introduced us.
Yes.
Okay.
Me and him were coaching the freshman softball baseball team at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was back, and that was kind of what I was going to do, is become a teacher and coach and live that life and go down that road.
Yeah. So that happens. My sister was a sophomore there at the time. She was in her math class, got out very quickly, safe, but cell phones were not really.
So your sister, who is in 10th grade, is in the building when the shooting takes place.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of investment still there. It's not like you're just an alumni.
No.
Yeah.
She remembers seeing one of them walk by the classroom with a gun. Hadn't started shooting or anything at this point. And so the two, Eric and Dylan, they were very into video production. And I remember our senior year, they had made a video of blowing up the school. And I mean, at that time, it wasn't and I mean, the whole school saw it. We were just, who
really thinks that's going to come to fruition?
I had a class with Eric, German class with Eric Harris for 3 years. So I didn't hang out with him outside of school, but I would talk to him in school. I remember the year before it happened, he got suspended for hacking into the school computers. Like, he was just a kid who was
troubled.
Yes.
Troubled.
So we didn't hear from my sister it happened at 11. We didn't hear from her till about 4 p.m. We had no idea where she was, if she was safe, because cell phones weren't really a thing, So, and the phone lines were so jammed up, no one could get in contact. No one knew what was going on. No. I mean, it was the first really big school shooting that... Yeah, it was just mass chaos. So we finally hear from her. My dad goes and picks her up. And just for me personally, the numbness I felt, that was the first biggest tragedy that I had ever been a part of or experienced. Besides my sister, I didn't have any friends that were killed, but I couldn't even bring myself to go to the memorial that had been set up in the park by the school and I just remember feeling from everyone that I didn't have a right to be upset because I wasn't there. And that's something that I finally have just worked out through therapy in the last several years. Our class, the last class there before it happened, there was nothing put into place for our class as far as mental health support which I mean, I get, you want to support the children actually who were there, obviously, but it affected
way more people.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, you were in the school. You knew those people. You had class with one of the shooters.
And our class, 98 and then 99, who were the seniors there, were very close.
Yeah, in my school, it was the same way.
Yeah, so like my kind of on again, off again, well, on again in high school, and then we were kind of on again, off again dating. And when that happened, you know, she was there, and I remember hours before, I remember going in the bathroom and just crying because like I hadn't heard from her, you know, and it was a weird day, obviously, but in a weird kind of like, or at least for me, because I'm coaching. I remember the next day.
You're coaching at Columbine.
Yeah. Yeah. We're coaching the baseball team. It's baseball season.
That's right. Okay.
And I remember like I'm 19, right? Like I'm still a kid. I'm in this like adult role. And I remember we don't have homes. Like we're both living with our parents. We're like, well, we can't go to school. Like we have to get with these kids and make sure they're okay. So we had them to his like parents' house. Like we had like team meeting at like, we don't have our own homes yet. And we have these, the parents' house. You know, 14 and 15-year-old kids coming over, and like we're 19. We don't know what to say. Like we're hurting, you know, like we're as shocked as the rest of the community, but we gotta something's gotta tell these kids,
here's the plan.
Yeah.
Let's process this.
Yeah.
Now you're like a parent or at least an adult, like overnight.
Mentoring fashion with them.
Right. You know, so I remember that part being really difficult because what do you say? You know, this was new and
they were in the school with shocking. The kids.
Yeah. And like,
I mean,
a lot of them had probably friends who died, or, you know, it was a lot of the younger kids because they weren't at lunch. They didn't have cars, so they were still on campus and just totally unequipped to know what to do or say. And just, you know,
I don't think you can. There's
and looking back on it, like it didn't matter because it was, you know, just being together or whatever. But it was the first thing where it was like, wow, it's different. You know, I mean, we weren't there. And that's why I don't think we have very different perspectives. Yeah.
Like, it affected us very differently.
Wow.
And that's okay.
Yep.
It just sounds to me like there is a layer of, it's like trauma and grief. Trauma and grief is what you both had been through prior to being brought together. And then as you come together, you know, at one point I'm wondering if you guys were like, wait a minute, there's beauty from ashes. Something's going on here.
I think the weird thing was even the stuff before we were dating, the grief was still shared, even though we did, you know, I mean,
you weren't together doing it. It was very similar.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't know. I mean, I knew of you, but she was too cool for me, though. Don't let her fool you.
No.
The truth is spoken.
So you're bring it back to Isaac, or you're back in the hospital.
Yes.
You guys go home.
Yes.
So we committed to one of us being at the hospital every single day that they were there.
Okay.
We didn't know how long they were going to be there. They were in that level 3 NICU. They had multiple blood transfusions.
Well, wait, just to clarify, we would go every day. They told us we had to take a day off. So each of us individually go 6 days a week, and then we would take an off day off. So every day, one of us would be there. Then there would be 2 days of the week, only one of us would be there.
Right. Yeah.
But they said, you're not going to make it. You have to take a day off.
Because we're still both working full time at this point as well.
Right. And you're not taking off for 3+ months. It's just not
happening.
Feasible.
Not happening.
So multiple blood transfusions. Isaiah was put on various ventilators. Hunter had heart surgery at 2 weeks old. Gosh,
other minor
X-rays stuff. And just
The big thing at that point was Isaiah's breathing.
Yeah.
That was the big.
He was definitely the sicker out of.
He was the sicker, and it was the much more, even like with Hunter's heart thing, it's heart surgery on a 2-week-old, but it wasn't on their radar.
2 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
Right. But
I've always respected doctors and nurses, but I have a newfound respect for them. Watching them be able to do these things on a 2-pound baby.
2-pound baby.
It's just.
I mean, what is 2 pounds? A can of cream of mushroom soup?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
They
tiny.
weigh the same as a can of Coke.
Yeah, they're tiny.
But what was weird to me was like the surgeries, the confidence in the doctors, like, well, we're going to do this. They're not worried about it. It was the breathing that they can't control.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as long as there's a plan for them, they had pretty good confidence that
they could
fix it. Right.
Yeah.
But you could see their frustration with the breathing because there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
Right. There's no surgery. You can't just do a lung transplant and
Right.
have them start breathing.
Right.
So that was by far probably the first month.
Yeah.
Ish.
But as we're going through that, though, so their birth mom, Lexi, she pumped for them every single day for the first month of their life and would bring it to the hospital with a 2 and 4-year-old. I mean,
well, after she went home and went back to her life, she was committed to doing
in
that.
between that too, so they were born November 18th. We found out tonight is Amy's birthday. So, she was released Thanksgiving Day. She had nowhere to go. So we are there when she's released from the hospital. We're driving her around trying to find a place where she can get a breast pump and, just trying to help her with these things. And then she ends up coming to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. So she spends Thanksgiving. So, I mean, this girl's a part of our family at this point. I feel like she's looking at me as like this older sister and I'm kind of like taking her under my wing. So we're very invested, and it was almost, to find out later, an unhealthy relationship.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But we
didn't know, though.
We had no guidance. We had no guidance from our agency. So it was important to us that she be there for all the firsts in the NICU. So she was the first one to hold each of the boys when they could be held. So they do the skin to skin where you'd like put them in your shirt. I mean, they're like this big. So you're just like stuffing them down in your shirt. And so she was there for that. And, the first bath, the first bottle feed. Because at that point, they were just being fed through a feeding tube down their nose. So they eventually, within the first month, they graduated to the level 2 NICU where it's not as intense. So kind of at that point, we kind of knew, okay, they're going to be okay, So
it was a lot better.
It was a lot better.
Yeah. It wasn't that day to day roller coaster of what, you go to the hospital and truly is like, what are we walking into today? What bad news are we going to have or what? And you could go a day where it was like you'd show up in the morning and it would be things are going good. And then by lunchtime, it's like, well,
not so good.
Not so good.
Yeah.
What a roller coaster.
For that
very up and down.
First month, very up and down and just kind of.
And we.
But simultaneously, we're building this relationship with Lexi and it's just. What being in the NICU for 3 months looks
because this woman gave us a gift that no one she gave us our children. Like it just felt right to us to include her in these things.
I personally feel that what you did was probably right, but I'll let you continue to tell the story because it does get difficult.
Yeah. So
more difficult. I mean, like, can it get more difficult?
Right.
Careful what you say.
Yeah. She was only in the hospital for 5 days after they were born.
That was the thing when you guys shared this before. You guys were the ones going up there,
every day.
She was just like going about her life.
Yep. Yeah.
And she was pumping and you said she was bringing.
For the first month, she was coming every day. But I think as it should be naturally, like she's not coming as often. But we did make sure to include her in the firsts.
Yep.
For all the firsts. Which
there may have been some transition for her.
Yes.
Like you just don't.
Yes.
I'm out.
Well, our agency actually advised us not to do that, but we felt it was hard. It was hard to let
her be the first.
Yeah. Me as a mom, it was hard to let her be the first
going back to
do
that
all
closed
that
adoption.
stuff.
Like this is supposed to be our kids. Not sharing
and so,
this.
But looking back on it, that's what God was telling us to do.
Yeah, I don't regret
I don't know. I don't regret it.
While
going
it wasn't
through it was
healthy
hard.
for her or us, we got way too bonded. I still don't regret it.
No,
I
don't either.
I think there was a time for years after they were born, I think we did, but
Yes.
now I don't. I truly believe God was working.
It sounds to me like
it was supposed to be.
Those are seeds. You guys have planted seeds for her.
Yeah.
And whether we're not the ones that get to water, but we don't water, God waters, but we can plant seeds.
Right.
Yeah.
And plant seeds and plant seeds.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So
but we went into level 2.
Level 2. I mean,
New Year's Eve was a little crazy.
Yeah.
I'm
like,
that's real quick.
Nothing major happened in level 2. Oh yeah, no.
So it was New Year's Eve, and it was like, let's just go to the hospital that night. We're not going to go out. Let's just be with the boys
at
midnight. And kind of a symbolic, like, we're going into this new year. The last year was crazy. This new year is going to be good, right? We're gonna be with them as we cross into 2012 at this point. And we got this great year ahead of us. The boys are going to be coming home. We're going to start our family together and all that. And so it was before midnight. And the thing in the NICU is they tell you real quick, you're going to hear a lot of noises, a lot of beeps. Don't worry about any of this. You'll know when to worry. They emphasize that. And then you learn that, right?
They say you'll see like 10 doctors rush into the room. That's when you worry.
Yeah, right. Get out of the way.
Okay. And there's, they would have Brady's, like, they're not fully able to breathe on their own. So they'd stop breathing and their pulse ox would, exactly. And it got to the point where the nurses ignore it, but you even start to learn to ignore these things. Like the first week, you're like
overstimulated.
Holy moly.
Running out the hallway.
Fix it.
You get used to it. And by this point, what is it, 6 weeks or so, we're used to it, right? So we're sitting there and they're still in incubators. They have a lot of wires connected to them, right? So just to kind of paint the picture, they're taking them out of the incubator. You kind of sit here, they put them
with all the cables,
and you're not like walking around with them. I mean, they're completely connected to this incubator. And so we're sitting there. Do you want to tell this? Do you want me to tell it?
So
either way.
We're sitting there. I'm holding Hunter. He's holding Isaiah. And by this time, they're still on the tube feeds through their nose. So they start their feed. And all of a sudden, Hunter's monitor, just everything drops. And things start beeping. And the nurse rushes over.
Well, no, she came over first time and cleared it.
Yes, she came over and cleared it. Okay. Like, it's beeping again, whatever.
Yeah.
So then it was not improving. It was still doing it. So she came over. I don't remember what she noticed on him to notice that there was something wrong.
Because Jamie's holding Hunter.
I'm holding him.
I'm holding Isaiah about this close, right?
Yeah. So she rips him out of my arms and puts him back in his little isolate bed. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, what's happening? Happened? And 10 doctors.
They call like a code red.
No.
And they all rush in.
Oh, no.
And so we're like, what is going on? He can't do anything.
I can't move because I put a baby in an incubator. Yeah, so I'm holding him like this. And they're like where you guys are. And it is like 10 doctors and nurses surrounding this incubator in full go mode, whatever we want to call it. And I remember just sitting there mesmerized, like you were in the hall
sobbing.
They have like a nurse consoling Jamie. I mean, it's not good. Like we could tell this is what they were talking about.
Oh boy.
And I remember just sitting there. I remember praying. I remember going to God. I'd go to God. Like even though I wanted that two-way relationship at this point, it was still very one-sided.
Well, you're in the
I'm in it, right?
You're in it.
Yeah.
You're in the trenches.
Yeah.
Like,
so
this is all I got.
You're in the fire.
Now.
He's refining you.
My
He's
perspective is different, right? Like, but I'm not diving into the Bible. I mean, I'm starting to read the Bible. I'm starting to get it, but I don't have, we're so dedicated just going to the hospital every day that it's still a very one-way relationship. And I remember praying and I remember you freaking out, and I couldn't go to Jamie, couldn't console her because I'm holding Isaiah. I don't know how to put him back in the incubator. I don't want to make
They're
things
all pretty
worse.
busy right now.
They're busy.
Right. Well, and so this nurse that I'm in the hallway with, I will never forget her saying this to me. She was a godly woman, and she said, he's God's child. If this is God's timing for him, it's okay. And that gave me a peace that I didn't really understand at that moment, but I mean, now I do. And she shifted my perspective in that moment on, these are not my children. These are God's children, you know? And
I've never heard her say that.
Yeah, I haven't shared this with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never heard that before.
Sometimes you like put it together
I've
as you're talking about
with
it.
some friends before.
Sure.
But from that moment on, I felt that these are, yes, they're my children to raise, but these are God's children. And she gave me a peace. I mean, I'm still freaking out, but she gave me a peace that I was like, okay, if this is his time to go, this is God's time.
Really in your hands,
you
God.
know?
Well, and the panic from the people who don't panic was weird to see, right?
Yeah.
These guys don't, like, we panic, doesn't matter. We don't know what we're doing. But to see the people who are calm, you know, it's like when the pilot starts freaking out.
Stirred up a little bit.
Good, right? Yeah.
No.
And what it ended up being is it was just a mistake where the nurse, instead of putting the breathing or the feed tube in his stomach, she accidentally put it in his lungs.
Oh.
And so he was drowning. He was basically, his lungs were filling up with milk. Yeah. And I guess one of them figured it out in this. So they got the suction, they're sucking, trying to get the milk out, and he's silent. There's no crying. I mean, he's drowning, and all of a sudden you hear this, you hear that like suction. Yeah, right.
Comes out.
And all of a sudden he starts screaming.
Yeah.
And the sigh of relief,
baby.
the collective just, I mean, it was I never forget that.
No.
I mean, it was the most intense minute. I mean, it was the scariest moment. I mean, for everything else we've gone through, and we'll continue to
because
talk
by now
about.
We're more bonded with
We
these
are more
kids.
bonded by them.
You know, like these are our kids.
We're
this
fully
point,
invested.
and so,
going there every day is very different than the previous loss. I mean, it wasn't a death; it was just our loss of being this kid's
But you've held them
parent.
now. You've nurtured them now. I mean, they're your babies.
Very different.
Well, as you're painting this picture, he puts you in even more, you're in control, because now you're holding this little fragile baby, and you can't just go here and get in there. You're like, I'm not in control, man.
Not in control.
You're driving. I'm holding.
Completely.
He gives you real tangible stuff, you guys.
I'm back here holding this thing, trying, you're driving.
Totally.
You're driving.
It was, I remember we stayed after that and we made it to midnight. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad that happened before midnight. Because I had this very, in my mind, like to some control or new faith or whatever it was, that like, I still believed in this, like symbolic, we're going to get into a new year and things are going to be different. Right.
It's God promised.
And
he came through.
Well, and I remember I said this like 3 times to you, like it happened before midnight. I was just so fixated on this. If we could get till midnight and get into 2012, things are going to turn around. And they did. I mean, they did for a bit. They got better. I mean, to the point where we started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right?
And so they did have one more surgery before they came home.
That eye surgery.
They both had to have laser eye surgery because they have had what's called ROP, retinopathy of prematurity. And that's actually what Stevie Wonder had and caused him to go blind. So they had developed...
They just didn't have that.
They didn't have the technology
and what was weird, and remember the day of the surgery, when it's eyes, that's scary, right? Like it's just
terrifying.
How you see everything,
right? So that one was
different world.
That one was just kind of like, man, I just really hope things go well, and we are getting closer to the light at the end of the tunnel, and then coming home, and it's like, we don't need trouble. Like, can we just get
these boys home and start being a family?
Right. And I remember we're standing there before the surgery, and this guy comes. I mean, he's younger than me, or maybe my age. What are we, 32 at this time? And this guy comes up and he just starts talking to me, and I'm just not in the place to like want to socialize, right? So he's just kind of
focused
this like small talk thing, and then he's like, and I was trying to not be rude, but also just was not, I thought it was like another dad or something. And it turns out it's the surgeon. And he's trying to tell me his plan.
Like, here's how it's going to go.
Always the irony. I love it.
Right. Yeah. And so when I recognize it's the surgeon, and he's like in jeans and like a sweatshirt, like he's not in scrubs, like he just showed up, and I realize it's the surgeon, and he's like, it's be fine, like it's no big deal. And I said, well, just one, he's like, do you have any questions? He's explaining the surgery and the laser. Said, how did you fix this before? And he goes, we didn't. He's like, this is, and I said, well, how old is this? And it wasn't long. It was like 5 years old or something. This wasn't like 20, 30 year technology. Wow. This was like recent technology. And that really, in a God kind of new faith perspective, just started going from like asking and needing to being thankful.
Thinking,
right. And I remember that, like,
wow,
to just looking at it different, like the appreciation and thanking the blessings for me at that point, like faith wise, shifted a little bit, and seeing God even in that. Right. And the surgery went fine and everything was fine, but they did come home eventually. It feels like they're never going to.
Did.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been, my goodness.
Well, so Hunter came home after 96 days in the NICU, and Isaiah came home 99 days.
And I remember those couple days. You bring your first kid home, it's scary, right? And
well, and we were used to having monitors that would tell us if they were going to stop breathing. And
I was
and now we have nothing, and we're like,
the threshold was like they had to go a couple days without having a bradycardia, but it wasn't like that long. And they're like, oh, they can definitely still have these Brady's, which is like they stop breathing. So
we're like,
keep an eye on them.
Okay,
this is lovely. I'll never be sleeping again in my life.
I'm like, which one of you's coming home with us?
He did say that.
Can we sleep? Can we bring the mom?
Or at least the monitor, right?
Exactly.
They're like, no, you'll be fine. I'm like, I'm not sure we will. You got way too much. But I remember when Hunter came home, the first night, I'm like, he's sleeping in, like, I'm sleeping next to him. I'm not going to sleep. Yeah, just staring at him. And I remember the first like day or two, how hard that is and how, and I'm like, there's another one coming. Like, this isn't even it. Like, there's a second one. Like, this is really hard, and we have another one coming home in 2 days. Like, oh no, how are we going to do this?
Yeah. But
and they both had things that you still, I mean, obviously, Isaiah a little bit more with the breathing, but still, I mean, heart surgery and Hunter, right?
Yeah.
So, and Isaiah, the whole time he's in the NICU, he will come home on oxygen. He did not go home on oxygen.
They were shy. They were 100. He will come home on oxygen. There is while you don't want that, there is a somewhat relief that like he'll be on oxygen. Right. So like, if he stops breathing, the oxygen will kick in. We have a backup plan.
Right. Good. Yeah.
And I remember the day, I'm like, where's the oxygen? They're like, he doesn't need it. And I'm like, you guys were pretty confident. Are you sure? And they're like, no, he doesn't need it. Because they want him to, that's what's going to, force him to
help him.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were confident enough he didn't need it. And we didn't know any better, but that was scary. Right.
Yeah.
And
more of that control. You're letting loose of the control.
But I didn't have the faith yet. You know what I mean?
He was growing you.
You were taking a step.
You're being forged in the fire.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah.
Right.
No, there was, all you had was your faith.
Right.
I mean, truly, because we don't have the skill set. We don't know anything.
No.
So you do have to rely on faith because you don't have anything else.
Right. Yeah. So we get them home. I mean, things are going pretty well. The NICU nurses got them on an amazing every 4-hour schedule, so we did not have to do that.
That was nice.
They were doing really well. I mean, Hunter did have some spots in his kidneys that they were worried about, so that was a fun journey. Every 3 months, I would have to get urine on an infant, which that was fun.
Fun, yeah.
He'd have to get he'd have to get an ultrasound and give blood. Have blood work drawn every 3 months. I will never forget taking him one time, and his veins were not close to the surface at all. So they would have to dig in this poor child's arms, and he would scream. And I remember walking out of where they take the blood one time, and people in the waiting room are crying from listening to my child scream from having
I had that
to...
once too. I took him one time and came out, and there was a lady crying, and I remember going up to her and I was like, listen, it's not as bad as it sounds. Like, he'll be
okay.
fine. Yeah,
he's okay.
He's okay. Like,
he's had a lot worse.
and just to how numb I think we had gotten to that point, it was just
well, and I
normal.
think, right. I mean, we tell this story to people who have children who have no sickness, no anything, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, how did you get through?" Like this was normal to us at this point. Like we didn't know any better.
Every health issue. I mean, Isaiah had RSV at 1 year. Oh, well, I'll get ahead, but I mean, he had RSV at 1 year old. I didn't know what RSV was. We go to the doctor. We had the best pediatrician. I mean, talk about God giving us a gift. Dr. Craig was the only pediatrician that God knew was for us. I mean, you go in with kid missing an arm, and this guy would be like, it'll grow back. Fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, the calmest guy in the doctor we could have possibly had. And so that made us calm. Right. And that was a real blessing, real blessing. And I remember one time going in, I mean, they were sick all the time. We were in the hospital. We were back in the hospital for all sorts of things. But I remember going to the doctor one time, and it was different. And he was like, I think he has RSV. I didn't know what RSV was, and I didn't know how serious it was for, I don't even know if he was one yet. And he was just turned one. Yeah, because they got the vaccine the first year. They didn't qualify for it the second, which would have been when they turned one. They got it when they were born. So he's like, we're going to call an ambulance to get him to the hospital. And I'm like, I can take them, like, but you're acting different than you ever have before. And I didn't realize the severity of it. And we end up at the real hospital, not like the urgent care, and quarantined for 4 days. I didn't realize like we show up, and Jamie had to bring me clothes, but I'm stuck with Isaiah, or he's stuck, I should say, in this hospital for 4 days. And they were just so susceptible to everything and everything was a bigger issue because of their, especially Isaiah's lack of lung capacity and his lung strength, that it just became very normal. And that's all we did know.
Well, and the amount of therapies that they had, we had a physical therapist at our house every week for 3 years. Hunter and eventually needed speech therapy because poor guy, to this day, he still drools because when they intubated him one time, they nicked his tongue. So his tongue is weak. He can't, his tongue doesn't push the saliva back the way that it should to this day. So we did speech therapy. So, I mean, looking back on it, Lexi, there's no way she would have been able to take them or do all these therapies.
How's she doing through this?
Right. There's no way she would have been able to do all of this for them.
Well, so this basically, there's the medical part and then there's the adoption part. So that's the medical part. We're kind of going through it. The adoption part's going great, right? Like we don't finalize, you basically finalize an adoption, at least in Colorado, in 6 months. 6 months. Okay, so Ohio, 6 months since they're born, they're not, we don't have legal, we have custody, but we're
foster parents.
We're foster parents at this point. Right. And
so mom can decide, Lexi can decide at any moment in the 6 months, technically, that she wants them back.
Yes. We're in
the state of Colorado, they have what they call expedited termination. So she terminated her rights at 7 days old. But the birth dad didn't. He didn't. So that was back and forth for a month, almost the whole time they were in the NICU. And we didn't know if he was going to sign his rights, and we're investing in these kids. And we don't know
again. Scenario's coming back up again.
We don't know if we are actually going to
come home with babies.
But it was weird because it was like every time we'd get good health news, we would get some drama with the birth situation. Usually it was mostly the birth dad. and we hadn't met him at this point. And so it's just, if it wasn't one thing, it was another, right? Like if it wasn't the bad health day, then it was a bad adoption day type thing. And so you couldn't even like focus on anything because it was going to change anyway. And it quickly did. Even when it was bad, it would quickly change back to good. But it was just, you threw out the what can happen next kind of thing.
Constant bring it because we know it's coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And it does help. It helped me. You were upset with God during this. It brought me close. It brought me to God. It brought me to Jesus, and it brought me much more faith. You know, my faith is growing through this because every time there's something, God's getting us through it. And I'm starting to recognize that.
You're starting to see it.
And I'm starting to be the faithful one in our marriage at this point, which she's was like, uncharted territory.
Right.
I'm like counsel, you know, and she's like, I'm mad at God. I'm like, no, God is great. Like, look at all he's
doing through this.
Yeah. And I get, I struggle to understand. I'm like, wait, you're supposed to be the Christian here. Like, what are you doing?
Well, he needed to raise you to where he needed you to be as the leader of the family, and he's doing it. And you're like roping me back in when I get just frustrated with school or kids or what kids come with or whatever. And he just kind of brings me back to the Lord. That's an equally yoked marriage.
Yes.
Because she needs you to do that.
But I didn't understand. I get that now, but I didn't. That was a foreign concept, and talk about not feeling equipped, right? Like you're the one grew up going to church. You're the one who
I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. I'm, you know, and I understand this now, how many examples in the Bible there are of this, but I didn't know those stories at the time. So I'm in this weird spot. You're in this weird spot with our faith. It's just mine's a good weird, but it's just unknown. You know, it's just this is, but I'm starting to gain confidence, and I'm starting to gain understanding, and I'm seeing God work in a different way, and I'm realizing what faith is. Like if with every one of these things, God is provided, God comes through. And so I'm building this faith. And I think you speak for you where you were at on that, but it was very different during this time.
Wow.
I had just kind of pulled away completely. I think I was just numb. That's just the only word I can use to describe it. We were in survival mode. We were numb. I was numb.
Gosh, think about the fight or flight mode, fight, flight, or freeze mode, and think of being in it for 3 years or more.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
Never really
thought about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
kind of what you're in,
But I think I never looked at it that way because it was never an option to flight.
Right. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
and that's not
sure.
like us being great people or anything. It just, I think that was God. And
another option.
I never felt an option. There was never a walk away moment.
Which, I mean, when you adopt, that is something they talk to you about because you don't know what a baby could be born with. And so.
But again, it's worst case, right? We're in this class and they're like, worst case scenario is you have this.
And we had that time. Several.
Yeah. So we had the failed adoption, then we had the health. We didn't know if these kids, if they were going to have.
They didn't say all
physical
of them
disabilities.
Oh yeah,
mental disabilities, learning. We didn't know any of this.
Issues. Of are we really going to get these boys?
We didn't
and not
know
being dramatic on this at all. Like they basically said, expect to have issues. Like these kids had too much. They've gone through too much at too early an age to not have issues. We're gonna have something. We don't know what it's gonna be, but just it doesn't have to be like this crazy severe thing, but they're gonna have
ramifications.
Of
a lot of stuff.
You're gonna need to be aware of. And
so I mean, Hunter had this kidney thing for 3 years was when it finally resolved itself, I believe. Isaiah had asthma, but I have asthma. I mean, he got croup a lot. But
they were susceptible to things, but no, I mean, as far as like disabilities or just what could have been long term, no, I mean, you've seen them.
Praise God. You would never look at those boys and think that this was their start.
Like Isaiah didn't come home with oxygen. They guaranteed that.
Well, I mean, even in that right there is God's protection.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Seeing God protect them in a way, the medical, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but just they're very scientific and they have what's in front of them. And it was very different than what God
had in
planned
order.
for
He's
that.
the healer. He's like,
always
let me
better.
watch what I'm
Thank
going
you,
to do.
medical field, but
Watch
God is
what I'm
always
gonna do.
better.
Watch this. Exactly.
Yeah, watch this.
It was truly the exact opposite of what they told us it was going to be. You know, they didn't tell us specifics of what it was going to be, but it would be something, and it has not been at all.
But so
we
get them home. Things are going well. We met up with the birth dad and our caseworker while they were still in the hospital. He wanted to meet us before terminating his rights, which
because he hadn't signed off yet.
He hadn't signed off on anything yet.
Oh man.
Which, you know, we understood. So we met with him. It went well. He signed the paperwork the next day.
And at this point, has he seen the kids?
I think he had.
I
believe he had.
Oh yeah, I think he did.
I think Lexi had taken him in maybe one or two times.
Not with us or anything.
No,
I was just
not
wondering
with
if
us.
that like was a determining factor for him.
No, I think he really just
him
wanted to meet us. So we met him for dinner. It went great. He signed the paperwork. They reached out to us and asked, so the boys are half Vietnamese. Their birth dad is full Vietnamese. His parents are from Vietnam. So in the Vietnamese culture, the firstborn male grandson is the head of the household. So his family was very against the adoption.
Yeah.
Culturally, that's not
very
good.
against the adoption. Yeah.
Yeah.
So while they were in the hospital, we had met some of the birth dad's sisters, some of his siblings. I think he has 6 siblings.
They were all
very nice.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And so they asked if we would bring the boys over to his parents' house so that the whole family could meet the boys. Another moment when he was talking about going to meet the first birth mom when you're nervous, that was...
Oh, that was 10 times more
The whole family, good Lord.
They don't want this adoption.
Right.
Yeah.
They're clear that they're not on board with this.
Let me bring your grandkids in.
We're walking into this knowing we're not the most popular people in the room.
Yeah.
And with all that said, I just got to make sure I say this, the most polite, respectful, welcoming people. I walked in about as scared as I've ever walked into something, nervous up to this point in my life. And by the end of the time, I'm sitting there with the birth dad and his brothers. We're watching, it was April, I think, at this point. It was just the start of the basketball. Like, it was like basketball. I remember NBA, it was like the playoffs are started or whatever. And we're all sitting there like we're friends for 20 years, cheering, watching this game, having like, I'm like, when are we getting together again? I mean, we did, but that's how welcoming they were in a situation that was about as hard of a situation we can go into, as opposed as they were to what was happening.
And the adoption was not finalized yet.
No, it was not finalized. Just to see how God would, to give them credit of how God would want people to behave in this type of situation. The grace that they had and the they're not getting what they want. They don't necessarily have the control to get what they want. We know we're on very opposite ends of how we want this to work out, and that we could still go over there, feel welcomed, end up hanging out together, stayed way longer than we were probably obligated to stay. Like, Jamie's like, we gotta go, and like everywhere we go, and I'm like, 10 more minutes.
We're watching basketball.
Game's not over.
Well, and for the boys, we got pictures. So Lexi's dad and her stepmom also came. We got pictures with their entire family.
Oh,
wow. Which is something for them.
Yeah.
I mean, when we finally started realizing we're not doing this for ourselves, we're doing it for them.
It became easier in a sense, not to interrupt, but it became easier in a sense because you have the guide of which to make decisions. You're not, it was easy, right? We're going to this. We don't want to. At all. But
it's for the greater good of those boys.
What's for the best for the boys. And that's God, if there ever is something, because I ain't that brave.
No.
I'm awful with confrontation.
Like, I don't
that is
that.
so just... Your story has got many, many layers to it.
Walking into that situation where they didn't want them to be adopted
and
in
then
the
you're
first
going
place.
to meet. I mean, let's just keep adding
it was
to it.
Add some more.
Then you're going to
it
meet.
gets better.
Oh, yes.
Well, so we do that. Things went great. It was June.
No, well, we got to May. Don't skip. We finalized we finally get to May. We finalized the adoption.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So this is now we are the legal parents.
Yeah.
They cannot be taken
They
from
signed
you.
off.
They are yours. Yeah.
We're home free on the adoption part. And
so 2012 is looking good.
2012 is looking
like
good.
you wanted.
We're
It's going. We're on track.
May of 2012, we're on track. And it was good because there's a reality of what we have in front of us still with their health, right? So we were always in this kind of split mode of focus to be able to close the adoption out and just truly focus on their health. Right.
Yes.
Now we can really get into it. And I mean, obviously they're fine now, but it took years of, like Jamie said, therapy, and that's a lot. And I mean, it's a lot to keep track. I don't know how you kept track of their appointments, yet alone making them and getting there and doing it.
And all the emotions that go behind all of that care.
Right. And then all they're like, this is what the plan is, and it's not easy, and it's like keeping track of those and the like exercises you got to do every day and but to be able to focus on that and put the adoption
that would be like another light switch for you. In my mind, it would be for you guys that once that adoption is finalized, now they're your kids. Now you're looking at them as, now it's our kids' health we're now focused on.
It's not, absolutely. Are they going to be our kids, or are they not?
Is somebody going to take them away? It's like you have kind of half in, half out.
But you're already fully caring for them as if.
But there is a switch that flips.
Yes.
Now it's like, now we're fully in because these are our children.
Right. And I remember, and this is weird, but I remember thinking that specifically when they went on our insurance. You know, that was a weird, like our health insurance, like it's not even the state paying for this now. It's our insurance. Right. And that was a weird kind of symbolic thing of like, to what you're saying.
Right.
But that was May, and we get to June's good. And then
so I get a phone call, or I get a text from Lexi in June asking if her and Tony, their birth dad, could come see the boys like that day.
And we had an arrangement, just to backtrack, you know, we had an open adoption to where she was going to see them, not like all the time.
Like ironed out how often or what that looked like or anything.
But she was going to see them again.
Open adoption.
Right.
Yeah. So she texted me that, and I said, no, today won't work. And she went off the rails, was incredibly upset that she could not see the kids. Come to find out, her and Tony were back together. So they thought that they should just, I guess, be able to see them whenever they wanted to, you know.
And this was a result of the
bonding
that
you had talked about
boundaries. I mean, the classic, like, do everything you're not supposed to do. We did, but we didn't know, and we didn't have any guidance
because no one was counseling us as they should have been.
We were, the three of us, me, Jamie, and Lexi, were on our own to try to figure out something that we had no business trying to figure out. So of course we got everything wrong, because why wouldn't we? And, you know, we're doing what we think is best, but obviously we're breaking every single adoption rule you can possibly break.
Well, because God just had more for you. God just had more.
Right. So she flies off the handle, and then she just stops communicating with me. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, I mean, this is what it is. We have to set boundaries.
Yeah, it's kind of like, we'll set them now.
We
have to.
Kind of forced into it.
We'll reset.
So about a month goes by. In July, I get a phone call from an attorney. From the agency.
I got the call.
Or you got the call from the agency, our agency.
Yeah, our agency called, and it was our counselor, and she basically was like, well, I got some bad news. The agency got served from Lexi that they did not do what they were supposed to do, and she's suing to get the kids back. And so
you're like,
that was about that was the craziest probably night of my life. I mean, there's a lot of them in this story, but that was the one where I think I was at that point more angry than you. That night, I remember I went next door to our neighbor's house, and I'm going to sound like I had a big drinking problem here, but I just like, I went over there and I just lost it to our neighbor. Our neighbor was like, good guy, great guy, and lived next door. We'd talk all the time, and I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't like rationalize things with Jamie. I couldn't, there was no plan here. We're not going through this. I just was unable to accept it. Was not strong enough in my faith to handle this the way I probably should have. But I remember just going next door and me and Tony just drinking, and like, I'm just in tears. And this poor guy, what's he going to say? You know, like he's not equipped for this. So
not a
just
counselor.
No, gosh, not this guy. This guy was like 6'8", 300 pounds. I mean, this was a tough guy. Like, but I remember, I don't know why, I just went. That's where I needed to be. It was really weird. And I think you were on the phone with your mom, and we're just in panic mode. Like this.
Yeah, we're going to lose the kids again.
This cannot be happening again. After the finalization, like where's the
done deal?
Where's the done deal? Where's the done line? We thought we were there.
Well, come to find out.
Well, hold on real quick. The problem at this point too is the agencies, like, what if they did do this wrong? Right? Like, we don't have any trust with them. So there's a time where it's like, what do we do?
What if
like
they broke the law and you have nothing? You have nothing to do about that.
Right?
You can
like
do
we
nothing
did our
about
part,
it.
but like, should we be fighting for these kids? Did she get everything that she should? Like, is this legitimate?
Did they follow through on their part?
Right? Like, so they're at that point. We're really isolated because we couldn't really trust the adoption agency. Right. We don't know if they're playing both sides. Like, we just couldn't trust at this point anyone. Yeah. Obviously, we're not in contact with Lexi and the birth dad. We don't know what to think about the agency. And she said, well, you're going to need to get your own lawyer. They were lawyered up already, but they told us we need to get our own lawyer.
Well, and their advice to us in the meantime was, let's have you guys bring the boys. They're going to come. We'll be here at the agency so they can just see the boys. So we just found out they're suing, trying to take these kids back.
And then now
and they're like, let's show this as a sign of like good faith or something. Come bring the boys so they can see them. And we didn't know.
Right. And I definitely don't want to come across as like, I think this was such a unique situation up to this point that there was no rule book for the agency. I don't want to sound like I'm throwing the agency under the bus. It's just at this point, it's clear to us, like, this is all happening because of a lack of counseling, a lack of their participation in setting boundaries, coaching
helping
us.
You.
Right. So at this point, I'm going into like defense mode of like,
you don't trust them.
I don't trust anything at this point.
Just the course of the way it happened.
Right. And they did also, did we do that? I don't remember.
That. So we go to this meeting with them, and the counselor's there, and she won't speak to us. She just wants to hold the boys the entire time. They bought a bunch of things for them and brought it and said, well, this is for them because we're going to get them back. So we want to start buying things for them, contributing. Yeah.
So it's already, it's already there. Their goal was, okay.
Yeah. And it was one of the most, it was more uncomfortable to me than meeting his family.
That was child's play. Well, and that was the theme. It's like, you thought that was bad.
How uncomfortable can I get you?
Yeah,
well, can't get worse. Well,
well, and now we're angry. Yes. Right. I think we got
and more than angry. I was more than angry at God. I was angry at them. Because up to this point I wasn't really angry with Lexi or Tony.
No, of course.
But now I was. And now I was going into mama bear mode where I'm like,
taking my kids.
This is not happening. Like,
and I don't know if there's been another time where both of us are angry. Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty calm, or if I get angry, Jamie's calm. Like, we've always been able to, but we're now both in fight mode on a different level.
You got us backed into a corner.
You got us backed into a corner, and we have everything to lose now. Before we had nothing to lose, right? It's like, well, let's do it again. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It switched at this point to where it's like, now we have everything to lose. And we did pray about it a lot. And it was clear, I think, that what they were trying to do was not in the best interest for the kids. Right. It was what they wanted.
Right.
It was clearly not.
They got back together, so they thought that they should have
get family.
And now they were back together. They want the kids and all this.
Let's call a spade a spade. The track record is not good either on their behalf. So that is not in the best interest of the kids. So, there comes a point where we have to face that.
And that's how we tried to, should we pursue this? Are these our kids to fight for?
Right.
Are they not? But we decided yes, right? Clearly.
Yeah.
And So then at that point, we're all in on the fight, right? And
so now we have to hire an attorney.
We have to get an attorney.
Enter.
We're so broke at this point. I just want to reiterate.
There's no need of overdrafts at this point.
We're like, Mom, Dad, you'll never guess what's happening now.
You're going to tap into the funds.
So they said, you're going to get your own attorney. We have an attorney. They're going to work in conjunction, but you need your own representation. So we said, well, who do we call? And they said, you're going to call this guy. His name was Seth, and they said he's the best.
He actually wrote
like the majority,
the adoption statute for the state of Colorado. So they're like, if you're going to hire anyone, you want to hire this guy because he's the one who wrote a lot of the Colorado law.
And we go to the meeting, and we don't know, is this, we don't know anything. Like, is their case strong? Is it not strong? Like, we don't know anything. We're going to go meet with this lawyer, and he's going to kind of tell us what we're looking at. And the short of it is they had sued on 16 points. And he tells us, well, the good news is 15 of them are garbage. They got a divorce attorney. Like, this attorney didn't really know what they're doing. They filed
in the wrong county. They only filed on one of the kids.
Thank you, Lord.
So he's going through all these things, and he goes, there's one point I'm kind of worried about. And we're like, it only takes one, right? It doesn't matter. It's just how many they throw. And he said their goal here is they're throwing as many things at the wall to see what sticks.
It's gonna stick,
But I'm concerned this one could. And I don't even remember what it was.
He said, I don't remember what it was either, but he said there is a 50-50 chance that they can get these kids back.
So it's going back into like the doctors again.
How old are the boys at this point?
They were
8 months.
7 or 8 months.
8 months, yeah. Our options at this point are we could go to trial or we could go to mediation, right? And everyone, the agency, I mean, it really is our call, I think, at this point. The agency kind of deferred to us. Obviously, we have more to lose here. So the agency's attorney, and our attorney are all like, you want to do mediation. And not understanding the law or anything, we're like, no, we're going to trial, like at first. And then Seth's like, no, you're not. Like, he's like, let me explain what that looks like. And it's like,
that's like a 2
to 3 year drawn out process that this is going to be in.
And how much harder would it be if it didn't go our way to lose the boys after 2 years?
Right. Yeah. So, we prayed, and it was very obvious mediation was going to be the best option, but we didn't know what that other attorney is going to come in, and are they going to have this point? And we're sitting there. I mean, obviously at this point you're putting your faith in God.
Yeah.
What else?
Whatever he wants it to be.
Right. What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
But that was, that was the hardest, right?
Yes.
That time from finding out that this lawsuit was happening or they were suing to the mediation and all of this was the darkest, hardest. Because health, it's like, to the nurse's point, like if God's calling them home, I mean, that's hard, obviously, but it's a good ending, right? I mean, he's going to be in heaven. The failed adoption, the baby can go back with that birth mom, and maybe that was what was supposed to happen, and the grandpa is there, and it's going to be okay. It hurt for us. This was different, and both from the bonding we had with them, also from what they would be going back to. We've seen the almost daily physical therapies that they've had to do. The doctor's appointments, all of it was almost too much for us. And here's 2 of us being able to do this with a relatively well-structured life, and
adults making money, not
kids having
it's
kids.
Just not, and they're not looking at it this way. But to know what was at stake beyond us losing the boys, which was hard enough, but what they would be going into
the boys
was too much. It was just, there was too much at stake. I don't want to say at stake, but
there was.
Right.
And so we go to mediation.
Now the most intense moment of my life, and this will be the last most intense moment.
So we go to mediation, and basically was a 2-hour. I mean, the judge was hardly in the room with us.
She would come in once in a while, ask for something, or talk to the lawyers for a second.
Yeah.
But vast majority of the
she
2
was in
hours.
with Lexi and Tony, and basically it was a 2-hour counseling session for Lexi because she had not done the post-placement counseling that the agency offers. So she was grieving. You know, I mean, she had placed her children with other people and she hadn't worked through or wasn't starting to work through the loss of
just
that.
let go of your kids.
Yeah. So obviously it went in our favor.
There was
the
one
mediation.
funny part to this where you're sitting there, right? And there's not a lot of talking. Even I am geared to like joke when I'm nervous and I'm not talking. So it's got to be bad. And, you know, the lawyers are kind of just working. We're just sitting there. It's really quiet. And the judge would come in and then it would get nervous because you'll know, like, are they done? Is this it? Like, but they would she'd come in, say something, go back. And so it's just really nuts, right? This whole process. Then she comes in towards the end and she's like, she requested some documents to the agency and they're going through and they can't find them. And it was like, this is it, right? This is it. This is where they're going to get us, is on some stupid papers not signed technicality type thing. And I remember Seth was getting nervous, right? Like, our attorney was like now concerned, right? So you go back to the hospital where it's like, gauge him when he's concerned. Like if the doctors are concerned, that's when you know to worry. It was the same type of thing. Seth's getting worried. Yeah, it must be serious, right? Well, they're going through like 2 or 3 times they find it. Here's the sigh of relief again. Yeah. They give the document to the judge, and then I think the next time she came in, she told us what we had proposed was they drop the case with prejudice, means they can't do it again. And
legally
cannot come back is what that means. And
which was the best case scenario
for us. And we would in return keep the adoption open. If they did not drop the case, we weren't going to lose the kid. Could we have lost them at that meeting? Yeah. No. Right. It would have just gone to trial. We said if you do not drop the case with prejudice and we go to trial, then we're closing we will never get together again. You know, you'll never see him again. Right. That's the offer we have on the table. Right. And the judge spent 2 hours telling her counseling this is a good idea. Right. And that you're lucky that they're even doing this at this point. Yeah. And so they accepted it. And
so part of the agreement, which is not, in some states it is legally binding, like an open adoption agreement where you actually legally have to meet so many times a year. Right. Colorado does not require that. So, but we agreed that we would see her once a year on their birthday. So first several years was very uncomfortable. And Tony was gone. At this point,
they got divorced.
They got married to strengthen their case against us, and then 2 weeks later, they were separated again, and they never got back together. So, if the boys would have gone back to them,
your discernment was correct.
Yeah. So we, as uncomfortable as it was, we committed to letting.
We said as long as it wasn't detrimental to the boys, which at 2, it's not going to be. No. But you know, as long as it was safe for them and not
gonna hurt, like create more stuff.
We'll go through whatever we have to go through. Right. Let's honor what we said we're gonna do and try to do this for the boys.
Yep. Well, and they have an older half brother and sister
that we had gotten close to. I mean,
this is true.
So first several years we met with her every year on their birthday.
And it was really like couple weeks before you, especially. I mean, I wasn't happy about it and I'd get kind of nervous, but you really had a hard time.
Yeah.
Probably a good 3 weeks before like November hit, and we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult leading up to that every year.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
PTSD.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Every text, remember, just like she would even after you knew legally, now that I mean, but that's the thing. It's like, well, what about the first time? I thought legally it was finalized. It's not right. So you just still had that. Like, I know now that's with prejudice, but like, what happens if there's a loophole here? So while you're confident, you're not 100% that at this point, what do you know, anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
Clearly, we're just not going to feel that like, when's the next shoe going to drop type situation.
Right. Yeah. So we do it for several years. Before their 5th birthday, the meeting for their 5th birthday, it was over the summer. I get a call from an attorney.
Oh, yeah.
That says, I'm so-and-so, the attorney for the case with Lexi. And I'm like,
here we go again.
Huh?
Here
like,
we go
what?
again.
Come to find out, it was dad of their half-siblings, their older half-siblings, was trying to get full custody of them. So
and he used us as a reference.
He used us as a reference because he knew everything that we were put through. Whoa. So,
but even that call, I took the rest of the day. Jamie called and told me, we know this has nothing to do with us.
Right.
I had to take the rest of the day off.
Hello, trauma.
Like, I couldn't, even knowing that it was nothing to do with us.
Right.
It was a call from a lawyer. Too great.
Mm-hmm. Regarding...
That's it. I'm calling it a day. I can't handle this.
So thankfully had nothing to do with us, but unfortunately she did lose custody of the boys' older siblings. So this happened the summer before their 5th birthday. We met her. I'll never forget. We were sitting at Chuck E. Cheese for their 5th birthday, and their half brother and sister were there too. So the 4 of them are off playing at Chuck E. Cheese, and we're sitting with her, and she looks at us and she says, I finally know I made the right decision. So it took 5 years for her to come to terms with it.
Or at least acknowledge it
to us. Yes.
Well, she's probably working through the grief of...
Yes. Well, now she's lost...
allowing her...
all of her children.
Her older 2 children as well. So...
her life at this point was probably closer to, I don't want to speak for her, but closer to her rock bottom.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it was beyond just Hunter and Isaiah at this point. And
now it's the others.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hearing that from her was obviously, thank you, Lord. Like, thank you for giving her that peace.
Yeah.
And thank you for her accepting that peace finally. And by now we had proven that as long as it was a healthy relationship, she was going to be in their life. They're going to know who she is.
I think I don't want to say trust because we never broke it, but she was building it back that we were going to do what we were going to say. We're going to do what we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
We were building trust back that she was holding to the boundaries. You know, our big concern was like, what do we do in February when she wants to see him?
Yes, exactly.
That's not the agreement, but she didn't do that. No. And so she's adhering to it. And it took a few years to kind of get that built back up. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've up until 2020, we saw her every year for their birthday. Well, we saw her in July of 2020.
Oh, right.
So we saw her up until then. And I mean, things kind of naturally, like every time we'd meet, things would get a little bit, she'd be talking to us more than like spending time with the boys, you know? So it just kind of naturally distanced a little bit. And then we didn't hear from her until this summer.
Yeah. She had moved.
I was actually, she didn't know we had moved to Oklahoma. So she reached out, and so when we would meet with her, she'd have a different boyfriend every time. Some of her boyfriends, her last boyfriend that we met with her was
Randy.
Yes, he had been through some things, been in prison, a lot of things, but he's the one who actually brought her to Christ.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Well, so and they had a baby together.
Yes. So the boys also have she just turned 6.
Yeah.
A 6-year-old little sister, half sister as well.
And I would always gauge her boyfriends from that protective perspective. Right.
Yeah.
And I actually bonded with him. I mean, you meet these guys, most of the time it'd be one time for a couple hours in Chuck E. Cheese, right? And they're walking into this really
weird situation. Not a normal situation.
Not normal. There's a lot of layers.
Right. Yeah. And so I always had a sympathy for the boyfriend because that's just a tough deal for them to be walking into. And but I'd always try to talk to them and get to know them and that sort of thing. And actually walked away having more respect. I mean, they were all fine. I actually never thought like this guy's trouble or this is a disaster. I mean, some were just better than others, but I just genuinely had good respect for him, and they had the baby, and I just felt like he was solid influence in her life, or whatever the case may be. It didn't work out, but
she reached out in June of this year, and I actually had planned to reach out to her as well, because the boys had been asking. They'd been wanting. We've always been very open with the boys. We have pictures of us with her hanging in our house.
Wow.
They know
they
who
have
she
pictures
is.
of
They have
their half sibling, you know, brother and sister, older brother and
from
sister.
Chuck E. Cheese, you know, the four of them in the photo booth together and stuff like that. So
we talk about them a lot, and just try the best we can to
foster that relationship.
Not try to hide it.
No. So she reaches out, and I responded. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just going to reach out to you too. We moved to Oklahoma. She was very happy for us. She's like, if I could, I'd leave Colorado too. So we met with her in July, this couple months ago. And right before we're leaving, she says to me, I've never told you this, but the first night we met, I went to the restroom, and I didn't know what it was at the time. She's like, now looking back on it, I know what it was. It was the Holy Spirit coming over me and telling me, these are not your children. These are their children.
Whoa.
Wow.
And recently, was it this year or last year?
It was this year.
This year, yeah, because the boys got baptized this year, earlier this year. And when we saw her, she had also gotten baptized.
She had just gotten baptized.
So she has found Jesus. She got baptized, and it was really cool. And she was really happy, and the boys were really happy that they all got baptized the same year.
Around the same time.
Wow.
They were just that was like a connection for them.
Yeah.
And this was because we hadn't seen her in a few years.
Yeah.
This was the first time the boys had seen her as young men, right?
Yeah.
Like not just going off and running and playing, but able to have conversations with adults and basically teenagers. And so I was a little more nervous in that sense, that we're going to all be hanging out together, and it's not just us talking to Lexi and her kind of seeing them and playing. Like they're going to be a part
interacting
of the
with her,
interacting in a way that they never have. And
it was wonderful. It went great.
It was a 10 out of 10. I mean, it could not, could not have gone better. And for her to tell us that about, you know, the first night we had met her and what she was feeling, and seeing her come to Christ, and seeing
my goodness,
him work in ways that, I mean,
only he can.
Only he can.
Only him.
And seeing this like group and her boyfriend, he was great. I love this guy. I would be friends with him in normal life in a heartbeat. Like it was like 4 friends hanging out. Like anyway, we were at this place called Boondocks, and like go-karts and putt golf and you know, all that stuff. And anyone there would have just thought, these are 4 friends with their kids, or brother and sister type thing with the family. Like nobody would have any idea of like the history of this. And to see, I think it brought a different level. Clearly it brought a different level, knowing she was baptized. She has found Christ. She bonded with the boys over that being baptized the same time.
That was really neat to see.
That was
Nothing better
amazing.
to bond over. Like that's what
totally.
What kind of, that is a redemption story.
Totally.
Redemption.
Wow.
You experienced, this is the worst that can happen multiple times, and look what God has done to restore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
we serve a mighty God.
Yeah, we sure do.
Amen.
We sure
We were
do.
sitting at the table, and they told us this story, and we were just like,
well, and now we know more. We're like, whoa.
Yeah, now that more is coming out, I'm like,
we're having a nice conversation, and then we're like, well, this is kind of heavy. Like, I don't know. Like,
no, because we've mentioned it in one of the other podcasts that we were talking, and then it would get on to us, and we're like, no, hold on. You got to go back to your story.
No, wait a minute. Did you just say that?
We were in here. You got to go back. You got to finish that.
Well, and I can't get up for the bathroom for this because.
Well, and I mean, for us, this is just our life. Like, this is just what.
Totally.
You know, like people, when we would tell people we had twins, they're like, oh my gosh, how do you do it with twins? We're like, well, we don't know any different. You know, this is just.
But here's the question I had. Your faith is being like tremendously just grown through this whole thing.
Yeah.
You were struggling. At what point did the struggle turn to, okay, I want Jeremy's on this train here. I got to get on there with him.
So I did many years of therapy after all of this. happened after the lawsuit.
I
did
why.
many years of therapy. And I went to a Christian counselor, but I don't feel like it was like my relationship with Jesus was focused on in it at all. So it was really boys going to the Christian school that they went to in Colorado that really, it's such an amazing community. And I started working there. I became very involved there. And just the people that God placed in my life, my best friend, they are really who were planting more seeds. So really up until the last 5 years, I didn't really understand what it was to have a personal relationship with Jesus. Yeah. So that's kind of what
the people, just to throw out the people that God put in Jamie's life at that school,
just brought that spark back. Yeah.
Well, it was growth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're underselling your faith. Like, I understand because of where you're at.
I've
now.
always had faith.
Right.
But I just didn't.
Your relationship with Jesus and your faith has just grown so much in those 5 years that it was this shallow thing.
Right.
And it's not. It's just you've grown so much.
Well, and us even moving
you know
down here. So he's been wanting to leave Colorado for years. Get on land. I mean, we both wanted to be on land, but get out of Colorado. I was immersed in this amazing Christian community that I'm like, this is an amazing school. We're not ripping our kids out of this and moving them to some random state. Like, what are you talking about? You're nuts.
Well, fly state.
Like, no, I don't like change. We're not doing that.
We would talk about it, and even when you would get on board, we weren't agreeing on where to go.
No.
She wanted to go north, I wanted to go south. I didn't want it colder, she didn't want it hotter. So it's like, man, I have this little window where she might be like, well, maybe we should leave. And then I would blow it up with some stupidness. Like, I didn't want to go deal with more snow than we already had. Ruin the whole thing.
So we came down here spring break of 2023.
March of 2023.
To visit Amy, his cousin, who moved here several years ago.
No, it's like a year before that.
Two.
Yeah.
So,
and we had this whole group, you have like group text before the trip and stuff, and we were turning it into the recruit Jamie to move to Oklahoma. I'd never been to Oklahoma, but I already knew I wanted to go to Oklahoma.
I'm out of here.
Any place other than Colorado, basically, he was fine with. He didn't care. So Jamie was like, I had no intention.
So you guys can joke all you want.
I'm not
happening.
Not moving. So we come down and we're just hanging out with Amy and Jason, and Amy's a different person. She was just so much calmer and just
it's crazy how it does that.
And so I'm like, wow.
Well,
hold on.
Just the point about Monday, we got in on a Sunday or a Saturday night.
Yeah.
And Sunday morning, it was dark by the time we got here. And Sunday morning, Jamie's like, I didn't realize how green it was. And it was, I'm like, ooh.
Got her.
Point number one.
Got her.
Yeah.
Keep it cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep it cool.
So we're just hanging out throughout the week, and it's much cheaper to buy a house here than it is in Colorado. Yeah. So we're just having fun, all looking on realtor.com. And I don't remember what day it was out of the week we were here. We drove.
It was Thursday.
Okay, Thursday.
It was Thursday.
We drove by this house that we were looking at online. We're like, well, this is really cool. Well, it happens to be the house we now live in.
Yeah.
But
we drove up and we're like, it looks vacant. Let's drive. And it's on land. So there's a long driveway.
Yeah, it is.
Like, let's just drive up the driveway and what
are they going to do? Shoot at us?
Yeah,
right. Well, you never know.
What's the worst that can happen?
You never know here.
I did not ask that. I learned my lesson now.
Do that.
Yeah.
Let's not do
I know the answer.
Right.
But we got out of the car. I remember, and I'm like, I can so see myself, like all of us living here, and it's in the country, and it's peaceful,
and I was not there yet.
No.
So we, I think Friday, drive up to this goat farm in Kansas. All the two families were driving up, and it's Amy and I in the car, and Jason and Jeremy have all the kids in their car, and
it's pretty brave.
It was the
we didn't
Lord.
Have a choice.
It was the Holy Spirit speaking through Amy. I can't even tell you exactly what it was she said to me, but I had been feeling in my heart that both of us working full time. And then, by the time everyone got home and got homework done and got activities and dinner, by the time all that was done, the four of us would just go to our own corners in the house and not interact at all, just be numb, just decompress. And we were talking about that. And she's like, but that's not why God gave us children. And that instant, second changed my mind on moving. And from then on, I'm like, okay, let's look. We talked to the boys about it. They were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get land and get animals. And
a total God thing. I started working from home after COVID, and they sent us home, and they kept saying, don't get comfortable. You're coming for years. I mean, this was 2020. We're into 2023. They're still like, we're coming back. So don't, and so at that point I felt pretty comfortable. They would have been fine if I said, we're going to move, and everyone came back, but I still didn't know. We had talked about this in like 2017. We were going to move maybe somewhere, even in Colorado, but where I would work from home. And they're like, we'll let you do it, but we don't think it's going to be good. And you're going to be out of sight, out of mind type thing. And we're not set up for this. And we ultimately decided, I don't want to take the risk. And so there was that kind of weighing on my mind with work, where it's like, I know we're home now. I know we've gone through this test run, but if we are going to go back, and then if I'm not, is that going to be a problem? Right. And it's like, we got the school and the environment, the community that we're in. You'll never, I mean, it's just unmatched. Like for Colorado, like it's just the most amazing people that we're going to be leaving, and family that
my
we're
whole
going to be
family
leaving.
And
my job, which I've been blessed with, that I'm putting at risk. And we get back, and I remember before I had left, they said, do you want to keep your office? Because when we come back, we're going to, kind of move things around. I said, I don't care, whatever's easiest. And they said, well, you can keep it if you want. And I said, yeah, I'll, whatever. And then went on vacation and get back. I think it was that Tuesday or Wednesday, they sent out, or I went into the office, and they said, yeah, about that office. They're like, we decided we're renting the whole downstairs, and everyone we're not coming back. We're going to have a couple open offices upstairs, but everyone's remote.
Wow.
We rented the office.
Thank you, Jesus.
And I was like, come on.
We're going. Oklahoma, here we come.
That was
redemption.
The first thing.
That was the first thing.
Then we look at selling our house in Colorado, and we're like, oh my gosh, going through showings and all of that stuff. And so Jeremy's like, well, let's check into Open Door. So we checked.
Jason told us to check into Open Door.
So we checked into Open Door, and they came out. They gave us a really fair offer on our house.
I'm like, we're going to get, they're going to be like 80%.
Right.
Yeah. And
they gave us a really fair offer. Then you have no inspection, none of that.
Great offer.
No showings.
We're out.
Yeah. So we get that going.
Well, and then the other thing was, and we've moved a few times, and I don't think we've ever agreed on our favorite house together.
Nope.
We drove to that one house. I was like, it's probably not going to be available still, but we looked at like every house from like Owasso to whatever south, Mounds or whatever. I don't know. And we didn't do what we normally do. Normally we would send each other a link. What do you think of this one? I love this one. We said, let's just individually look. We're not going to communicate on it for like a week, and we'll just come back and see what we're thinking. And we came back, and Jamie's like, which one do you like the most? And I go, actually, for me, the one I like the most is that one we drove to. And Jamie goes, so do I.
No.
And I'm like, that's crazy, because we never agree on this type of stuff, like ever. And so there's that. And then we
did a virtual walkthrough. Like the first time we ever actually stepped foot in our house was during the inspection.
Jason and Amy went to do the showing.
That's right.
And they had a FaceTime.
That's awesome.
Around.
So I mean, within 2 months' time, he was down here.
No, less than that. We came down spring break, was like the third week of March, and I was down April 27th.
Wow.
It was like a month and 4 days or something.
Smoothest move we've ever had.
We didn't mess around.
I mean,
several states away. Isn't that nuts?
To have a smooth move several states away, you're
same.
like, okay, obviously this
is
meant
to be trials, but then you were in the valley. Now
the redemption.
Yeah.
The Lord is my shepherd.
But the thing I think you were trying to get at is you were between moving,
adamantly opposed.
0.0 moving, and I had talked to Jamie about homeschooling a few different times, and Jamie was like,
kindergarten. The boys were in kindergarten. I'm like, no,
that's not me. I'm not a homeschool teacher. That's just not my strong suit.
Such a blessing to have that time with our boys, and I'm enjoying it. I'm loving learning, relearning all this stuff. You forget that you learn when you're younger. It's been awesome.
But it just speaks to the trusting God. You felt God calling and building that faith to listen, right? Which we didn't have. I'm not sure. I mean, that was you who did that. I wanted to move. It was easy for me.
Very similar to her too. She had to take that step of moving to Oklahoma. What?
All obedience. All okay. I literally just stepped in to the water with you. Because I'm not going to be able to do. I mean, if this is on you, then it's on you.
Right.
Like, just tell me what's the next step. I resigned from teaching in Ohio. I would have retired, but in Ohio, you have to have 22 years. I had 15. I resigned from teaching without having any official 9-to-5 job. Here. We just had side business. And I was like, that, it was very odd to me, but I also had a peace at the same time.
Yes.
This should feel weird, and it doesn't.
I had a peace.
That's how you know, right?
Yeah.
I had a peace I had never experienced in deciding to move here. I was like, huh? Wait, what?
It's good to hear, though, that it's slower.
Yeah.
Because she had the same thing. She's like, man, it is way slower here.
It is.
Way slower paced here.
It's just it's a good place to raise a family.
I thank God every day that he let us down here. I really do. I just,
even on the hard days when we're missing
the
family.
family.
And
and there are hard days. I mean, I'm sure
cry.
you have that too.
Yeah. Get a picture and I just cry because I'm like, man, I miss that kid. I miss that niece. I miss my sister. I miss.
Well, you leave everything you know.
Yeah.
Everything you know.
Right. And that's not easy. And I think there's days, I said the other day, I'm like, I'm having one of those, what did we do days? You know, I don't have them often, but the other day I just thought, what are we doing? You know, and
I'll pinch myself and go, I'm in Oklahoma.
What God wants you to do. Yeah.
What in the world?
Not even that, but now you're sitting upstairs doing a podcast.
Well, and other people have such stories to share that God is in the details. The amount of trauma and trials and tribulations that you have walked out in the last 15 years would make a lot of people turn the other way. I praise God that you stuck with him and that even when it was probably hard to feel that he was there, you knew that he was the one that had to do it. It had to be on his terms, not yours.
Yeah.
It makes me weep because, and then look, you guys, you witnessed Lexi coming to Christ.
Yeah.
Holy
moly.
At the same time your boys did.
I really don't have words for how great that last meeting was, right? I mean, they were always like a relief when we would be done with them just because it was stressful and it's always hard, right? And this one was so different. And
he gave you the peace about it.
Exactly. And I think he gave her the peace too.
Yes.
I think I think that was much more important to see her having that peace that she was not going to have without Jesus, and not only with the boys, but other struggles in her life and where she had been. And to see that growth and see to come to her faith in that older brother, older sister relationship or perspective, to be able to see that.
It brought everything full circle.
Completely.
And it made, not that we wouldn't, I mean, we've had so many people along the years being like, why would you continue to have a relationship with this person who put you through horrible thing after horrible thing? I mean, my own dad didn't understand it, but this is a person who gave us something that no one can ever give us. And we owe our family to her. I mean, we owe our family to God, but
he clearly was working.
Well,
and he softened both of your hearts over, and you were able to make it about fixing your eyes on Jesus and not on our own wants and needs, which along the way, it's kind of like at some point I would think that most people would be like, no, I'm done, closing the door, done. but you have kept the door open and witnessed her come to Christ.
Yeah, I don't think for most people, I mean, the human response is to close that door.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
The Jesus response is to keep it open.
Right.
Keep
The
it
Holy
wide
Spirit
open.
kept it open
Yes.
because left to our own
it would have been
rationale
closed a long
and
time ago.
advice, it would have been
Yep.
closed and
adoption,
locked
yeah.
and everything. I mean, after the lawsuit, I think even Christians to know about the forgiveness and to know you're supposed to forgive and then to actually do it at that point of that hurt are two very different things.
Yeah.
It is
And
the
Putting
rubber
it into
meets the road
practice
type
is a
faith.
whole lot different.
Absolutely right. And I think that's the Holy Spirit. I don't,
Yeah.
I truly believe
our flesh could not have forgiven.
Not a chance.
No.
And so you just look at but had we closed it, we would not have had that last meeting. And
It would have hardened you a little bit there. Yeah.
Would have hardened us. We would have never gotten to see Lexi to know that she found Christ, and she would have not gotten to see the boys.
Well, and for the continued relationship for the boys. I mean, we're
And
entering the
for-
teenage years.
For all of them,
You know, and we don't know how it's going to affect each of them as they get older. But I mean, it's a continual conversation.
And it's
in
a
our
continual
house.
showing of just turning to Jesus, because what would the boys have missed out on if they didn't get that bonding moment of our biological mother got saved and gave her life to Christ in the same month we did.
And they take that for 12 years old. To brag on them for a second, they take that very seriously.
Yes, they do.
They are very serious about their faith, like
Love
for
it.
a 12-year-old level, really for any level. So I think it brought them a peace. We have always tried to paint Lexi in the best light we can as to why she made the decision she did, and we told her that. I talked to her about that in June when we saw her, but the boys only really know what we have kind of said, right?
Sure.
And I think they're old enough at this point to understand it must have not have been good for her to have to make that decision.
Yeah.
That's consistent with what we've told them, that she made this decision out of love, not for you guys, right? So I think they're old enough now to understand it must have been bad. And so for them to see her life, that redemption, for her to have found Christ, I don't want to speak for them, but I could sense that there was a relief and there was a happiness, a pride, like a joy, and just they take it seriously. And if nothing else, it was worth it for them to see that. Honestly, I think that really was an important thing for the boys, and that bonding to be able to all be baptized within like 2 weeks, I think it was, or 3 weeks. It was close.
That's crazy.
Your obedience in continuing to just say yes when it may have been easier on the flesh to say no.
Oh, we tried to say no. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I'm glad he lightning bolted you.
Tried to say no.
The cool part is he's not done with the story yet.
No.
He's just getting started.
And he wants to bless you more, and he wants to bless the boys more, and Lexi and all those who give their lives to him.
Yeah. And to be able to experience what we have and come out to where we are. I know everyone has a different, I'll speak for me, like everyone has a different faith journey, but I could have never predicted this would be mine. No. And I love every minute of it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't love it when you're going through it, but looking back, having this opportunity to talk about it, man, God is good. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Yep. He's a good God. And on that, I think we're going to shut it down. But I do think that there's going to have to be a sequel, because we have other things to talk about from the move from Colorado to Oklahoma. So would you guys be willing to come on again?
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
If you'll have us.
Listen, I'm like weeping the whole time, because even though I've heard part of the story, we always learn more. It increases my faith to see people put their faith in a God that they can't even see, but that they know is real, and that his promises are true because his word says it. And then you watch it unfold in your own life because you said yes. It makes me weep, and it makes me know for sure that I've chosen the one true King.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, and
you guys are walking in scripture. You know, you're supposed to take care of the orphan widows.
I remember, just real quick to throw in on that, I remember I was going down with a coworker to pick up some furniture from the agency to get over to Lexi. And I said something, and he was a Christian, and he said the same thing to me early on, and I didn't even know that in the Bible, right? I mean, that was like day 4, and I was like, really? And he's like, oh yeah, that's
scriptural.
Yeah.
That's scriptural, right? And I'm like, all right, well, this is God ordained. Okay,
It's supposed to be taken care of. Yeah.
And it just proves that he's always with you in the fire. He's with you in the fire. He doesn't say you will not experience the fire. I mean, Jesus did, and we're to be examples of Jesus. Absolutely. So thank you guys for forging through the fire with him and for walking alongside us.
Well, it's a great story, but it's also not anything to do with our story at all. This is your guys' story of adoption, which we have no experience in.
It's just about Jesus being in it. How did you find him, and how do you follow him today? And you guys have had a lot of stuff where people would be like, "Peace out, dude. You do not work."
You know,
I mean, a lot of people might say that.
Of people.
We pray this blesses you. We know it will. Our God works like that.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you guys for coming on. What a story you have.
Thank you both for having us.
Oh my
so
goodness.
much.
I can't wait for part 2. And when we think of you guys, we just smile very big. We just love you very much.
We love you guys too.
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
Feeling is mutual.
Love you. All right. We're out. See ya. Bye.
See you guys. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this journey of faith and reflection. We hope today's episode has inspired and encouraged you in your walk with Christ. Remember, no matter where you are, God's love is always with you, guiding and supporting you every step of the way. If you've been blessed by our podcast, we'd love for you to share it with others who might also benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow us on social media for more updates and encouragement. New episodes are released the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month. Until next time, as it is written in Joshua 1:9, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.